Do you know how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years?
Too many.
Okay, now 5 is a lot, right? I'm gonna give you some credit. Do you know how many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
I want to watch that execution. That'll make my day better. I want to see him on a public block and get him be publicly executed. And I think that would be justice. At what age should you start to see public executions? But hold on a second. Don't you agree that more speech, not less speech, is better for a free society? Prowling blacks go around for fun to go target white people. That's a fact.
Now let's get it all in perspective. For all y'all enjoyment, a song y'all can step with. Y'all appointed me to bring rap justice, but I ain't 5-0. Y'all know it's not, yo. Grey Goose and a whole lot of hydro. Only describe us as soldier survivors. Stay laced in the best, well dressed with finesse in the white team, looking for white meat.
So if you had a daughter and she was 10 and she got raped when she was going to give birth and she was going to live, would you want her to go through that and carry her rapist baby?
The answer is yes, maybe.
In the days after the death of George Floyd, conservatives created the George Floyd Challenge on social media, where they took pictures of themselves mocking Floyd's last moments before his death.
And you whole great swing around like Turtles. King of the tank. Yeah, I've been that. You know I click clack where you and your men's at. Through the Smurf, through the Wop baseball bat. Rooftop like we bringing 88 back. They shooting.
On April 20th, 1999, I was in my junior year of high school in
no more
math
murder
class,
situation
middle
was
of
made
what seemingly was a normal day, and my teacher, whose
don't get me
name I
wrong,
don't
I'll
quite
do it.
remember, came into
But if
class
I was
late
you, I
with
would
a
think
ghostly
very
look on his
carefully.
face. He was a
Save
first
your
year teacher,
progress.
one of the few black male teachers I think I had all through high school. He was from Colorado, so he had a bit of a Carlton Banks swag, very proper. But he settled us down and announced that there had been a shooting at a high school in Colorado, and that our school, way in Illinois, might be dismissed soon. I didn't go to a school where I worried about safety that much.
Hey,
this is
that
the
was a
South
mercy
Chicago
killing.
suburbs in the 90s, and don't
That's
get me
right,
wrong,
see?
gang violence
Can't
was
stand me for
definitely a
that.
thing, even in the suburbs back then. But in my school, at worst, there were a few fights. I
Okay,
might have
okay, you're
seen
the
some
boss.
gang activity once or twice. So it was weird to all of us that this shooting was significant enough
I mean,
in a
is it
whole state
over now
across the
again?
country
Like-
that they were going to cancel school here, or that anything
I told
about
them to.
our school in particular would need to change in the aftermath of the Columbine
going to
massacre.
murder a cute
Now, I understand
old couple
gang
that was some
issues have been
poxy
relevant to the city of
friends.
Chicago for decades. I wasn't even
And
allowed
murdered
to
him.
wear a certain color combination since
Derek.
like 5th grade, because even in the suburbs, the gang problem was serious enough for them to pay attention. I had to learn a handshake or two to walk through my neighborhood just to get to school for a short period of time. But I didn't know any serious gangsters, right? I wasn't in the streets like that. And the streets that you would have to be in like
Piss off,
that
murderer.
were not
Okay.
near me. But I do vividly remember stories of Yummy Sandiford, Dantrell Davis, and Girl X. Horrifying stories of crime in Chicago in the 90s.
It's weird, but
But
no, wait,
far enough
I
away
thought I was gonna
that I
choose
didn't
three.
think
Did I say
about it
that
in my
on- I
daily
did- I think I
life.
did that
At the
on-
same time, it did reflect enough of my world that I understood that I was still somewhat a part of it. But I
Wait,
didn't
which
feel
one
it at
was it?
school.
Fuck.
My high school was pretty decent.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
well
Okay,
mixed
okay,
at the
yeah.
time, both racially and socioeconomically. There was a handful of rougher kids in the city who went to school, but that was it. I worried more about getting roasted at the lunch table than getting chased home by GDs. But after Columbine, I suddenly had a new fear that I needed
Alright,
to
let's go off the
face
edge.
every day. Random, quiet, edgy white boys. Well, not super random, because one thing that came out of Columbine was that there was a certain type of young white male that was almost always behind these types of events.
too
And
young
they
when
were
that
more
happened.
common at my school than any alleged thugs. See, much like the black parts feeding into the school, there were also poor white parts. And I noticed early on that the poor white kids at the school did not mix well with the ones from the nicer part of the suburbs. In fact, they were bullied incessantly by those kids. And some of those kids fit the description, if you will. They seemed frustrated with the world in ways that didn't make sense to me, because to me, they were still white, couldn't be that bad, right? Over the years, I found most of these guys on Facebook, and most of them, I would say, are living useful, healthy lives. Most of them actually have moderate to liberal politics at the end of the day. But a few of them still seem very,
that didn't work out
very
quite as
angry.
I expected.
But these days, I kind of get it. Young men like Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, the perpetrators of the Columbine massacre, they, for whatever reason, felt very similar to these boys and men. And they
I
just
need to see if I
decided to
can kill that fucking
respond in
fish.
destructive and horrifying ways. And of course, you know, they weren't the first or the last.
Students also say that members of the small suburban gang bragged about their guns and ammo. One cyber chatter even recalled a previous
Cyber
warning
chatter.
that a certain El Caress wrote about preparing for the big April 20th. You're all gonna be sorry. Terrorism experts widely know that this time of year has been extremely
Cyber
violent
chatter.
throughout history. April 19th is the anniversary of many painful moments, from Waco to Ruby Ridge to Oklahoma City. And this past April 20th was the 110th anniversary of Adolf Hitler's birthday.
Oh my
April
god.
20th might just turn out to be a watershed date for an event such as what occurred in Colorado and might in the future precipitate other types of events like this.
In 1999, Columbine was actually the fourth school shooting to get significant media coverage in around 4 years. A few years before, Kip Kinkle shot 20 students a day after murdering both his parents
That's a fish.
in Oregon. In that
Okay.
same year, 2 middle school students set up a sniper's nest and pulled the fire alarm at Westside Middle School in Arkansas, killing a teacher and 4 middle schoolers. Sometime later, there was another shooting in Georgia, or maybe it was back in Colorado, maybe it was Illinois. Fast forward some years, and it's a guy driving a car through a college in California. It's hard to say. There's so
Am I gonna help
many.
the Jesus
and to be
guy, like,
honest,
pretend to turn
I
bread into
personally
fish or
stopped
something
counting
by
them the
providing
way I
good fish?
did back in 2012 in Newton, Connecticut. Because that's when I realized that no matter what happened or how many people died, nothing was ever going to be done about this problem. In 2012, Adam Lanza used a Bushmaster XM15 to kill 27 people,
chaps.
7 adults, and 20 elementary school age children. You would think that such an event would elicit national outrage strong enough to change gun laws in this country forever. That's what happened in other places where mass shootings occur. You'd think that this nation would do some deep reflection on its engagement with guns, mental illness, and the ways young men, mostly white young men, are being socialized to make sure
You
that
thought
something
that.
this senseless will never happen again. Surely someone would pay a price for the death of nearly 30 innocent people, mostly innocent children, innocent,
after
mostly
Sandy Hook,
white
that was when I knew
children.
for sure. I was like, no,
But
it's never gonna happen, dude.
Instead, it actually birthed
never.
a new conspiracy movement.
If that
People
didn't
like
do it,
Alex
nothing will. I
Jones
think a
made
lot of people
harassing
felt
the
that way too.
families
That
of
was
the
like,
victims
if
their
you
new
really
content
remember,
formula. So much so that he was
that
sued
was
into
really like the
relative
line
obscurity.
where people just
And
became
once that
really
happened, it
apathetic
became
about every
clear
mass shooting that happened
nothing
after
would
that.
ever
Like
be
there was
done
still sad
about
people
these
mourned,
types
and
of spree
everything.
shootings
But
because it's
there was
more
also
important to
this
serve
kinda
the
like
interests of
hopelessness.
gun lobbyists and the ideology
That was like when the
presents
real
it
drop
than
off.
to
People
serve the
became
people
so
suffering
jaded.
from the gun violence themselves. Because to them, to white America especially, it's worth it. I think it's worth it to have
a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year,
Not
so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
Oh, they're taking him to go get killed, right? Okay.
A source tells CNN that Trump ally and the founder of Turning Points USA,
can I go in the other
Charlie
place? Let me
Kirk,
try that.
was shot at an event on a college campus in Utah.
Kirk was actually shot in the neck. The school adding that Kirk was 20 minutes into speaking
When
I doubt
shots
they're
were
gonna
fired
kill
from a nearby
Jesus guy.
building. According to the university,
in
there
here.
are reports that Kirk was hit.
We can hear the audio where an audience member asked Kirk about mass shooters in
I remember
America
watching this
right
on-
before the gunshot. An audience member says, "Do you know how many mass shooters?"
And like he was seeing the reports that like he was like hanging on or whatever, right? That he was like in critical condition. And then he like saw the video and he was just like, no man, he's fucking dead. Like there's no way. He's like, I didn't get the report, but after seeing that, like there's no fucking way. Yeah, that's basically how I felt. It's like that scene in fucking Nightmare on Elm Street where they suck in Johnny Depp's character and then just like way more blood than like a human being could possibly have in their body. Dead. Exaggerating. Johann Oh wow. I'm like girl there. A girl with a cheap amethyst earring hiding behind a curtain. Hello? Yes. Are you? I don't.
Shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years. Kirk says counting or not counting gang violence, and that is when that single shot was fired.
It is my great dishonor to be the person that says this and breaks this to you on television, but Charlie Kirk, according to the President of the United States,
Why would I give
is
you-
dead.
When I look
really
at the
would
very
be nothing.
public, gruesome murder of Charlie
Back
Kirk,
of guts
I
and
can't help
bones
but
and
realize that for the
broken
first time
dreams.
since 2012, I'm reminded of this brand of spectacle violence, somewhere between
Okay, you may
terrorism,
return to
true
your
crime, political violence, and
I'm not
accelerationism.
telling-
But, and here's
But
the
you hate
important
me.
part, almost
What?
always
No.
exclusively white,
You hate
both
me.
in the victims, but also the perpetrators. It's actually not ideal to talk
oh, wait.
openly about the
You want a head?
perpetrators of mass shootings. I'm gonna break some social mores in this video, among many
Oh,
other
I'm not-
things.
I'm not
The
saying
reason why I
that.
call it spectacle violence is because, for the most part,
fucking
the individuals
Austin
that do these horrific acts do them for attention. It's why they write
Bitch, won't help
manifestos
with
and
that.
send press kits to local media. Some have even live streamed their crimes. So talking about them publicly ends up being exactly what they want, and in many ways, it motivates copycats. However, at a certain point, I feel like certain conversations need to be
Are
had,
you sure?
especially when
Okay,
some of the main people who need to hear these things are trying very hard to avoid the subject. The underlying forces behind these events, behind the murder of Charlie Kirk and even the attempted murder of Donald Trump, are things the right deeply wants to avoid, because talking about these things might force many on the right to critically engage with the ongoing
fine.
struggle that the right is in
I
with its
deserved a
own
good zapping for that
ideology
one.
and the tangible results that ideology leads to, which, to put simply, is rampant
I'm gonna do that
unnecessary
to all
death.
of them from now on.
And by rampant unnecessary death, I'm not just talking about the multiple genocides happening across the world through American imperialism,
I'll spare
or
you
the
this one
many
time.
preventable deaths happening because of poor health care or poverty in America right now. I'm genuinely just talking about normal white people that are dying or killing themselves greatly due to the ideology that the right promotes throughout this country. I believe many modern
Imagine living in, like,
conservatives,
a prison of
particularly
your
the
own mind
men,
like that.
are in a death cult. It's not a hot take to speak to how the party of Trump thrives on the pain and suffering of others, but today,
thinking-
for
like,
this
I'm thinking
video,
specifically of,
I
like,
want to
black
spend
type
time
people.
on the real byproduct of that. The fact that the biggest body counts, at least here in the States, is actually other white people, and that the cult works extremely hard, often using figures like Charlie Kirk to hide this reality, or maybe make it seem like it's all worth it, as we see them do with his death in particular. I had no desire or intention to talk about Kirk because I try my best to avoid these types of headaches. But in the wake of his death, the right has tried to turn him into Martin Luther King, and Charlie Kirk directly insulted Martin Luther King's legacy.
Yeah, and the Civil Rights Act, though, let's be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white weapon.
Yeah, and that's the reality.
So there's a need for some direct pushback and response in this regard. Also, I have to admit, I'm a bit fearful of the response this might get from the right. They seem to feel like this one time, nobody should disagree with their views of this guy or make fun of the fact that he died, that nobody should make jokes about a person who was overtly hateful and ugly to them. Mind you that in the days after the death of George Floyd, conservatives created the George Floyd Challenge on social media, where they took pictures of themselves mocking Floyd's last moments before his death. And to this day, they are so obsessed with mocking him that they're still keeping him alive through memes and AI. But somehow, Charlie Kirk is where we draw the line. So you guys got that one, sure. With that said, I will forewarn you, this is going to be a pretty gruesome, ugly, hard to watch video at times. I'm going to talk candidly and maybe even flippantly about death and self-harm and mental illness and mass murder and all the isms. While I have some hopeful things to speak to by the end, this is definitely a video that will make you feel shitty at times, because it made me feel shitty making it. But it needs to be done. It needs to be known years from now, when we finally are out of this situation, that many people saw this nonsense for what it was, and will hopefully be there to inform those who don't know any better just who Charlie Kirk was and the greater context in which he lived. because these ugly
gonna say,
times
you cannot
won't
again
last forever, and historical
that
record
shit.
is needed
Knocking
lest
over
we
the candle and
carelessly
you did.
repeat avoidable mistakes. So let's talk about Charlie Kirk and the cult that killed him. Part 1, the origins of the culture war.
No.
Okay.
The American family, liberty, freedom, the
magnificent money.
Constitution, our history, veterans. That's what we're conserving.
You are on the precipice of the most important
part of
culture
you. I
war.
hate you.
The world doesn't revolve around you.
Young men do not know how to control themselves. Ladies, would you agree? Oh, don't worry. I'm going to do the whole other side of this in a second, so you better be ready. You better be ready. They're like, oh, yeah.
I guess I'm going to walk away then.
It's going to be an equal
Out for
opportunity
now,
offender.
amiga.
Wait,
To
if I kill this
understand
person,
Charlie
that's
Kirk
not
in
technically- it's not a
totality,
person,
we first
right? I can
need to
kill it.
understand that he isn't the first,
Hey,
nor
you
will
can
he
take
be the
my sword.
last of his kind. In fact, he's part of a long-standing tradition of right-wing provocateurs whose job is not doing politics the right way, as some dumb asshole might say on their podcast. But instead, he was furthering a far-right agenda in this country, and this is apparent in just how far the right has been able to shift the Overton window in terms of what are even acceptable things to say or believe in our modern society. For example, no American would have supported or
I'm gonna
even
vote pass. You
seriously
wanna go
engaged with the
somewhere?
idea of a president getting a third term ever since FDR did it nearly 75 years ago. It's literally in the Constitution. However, for weeks now, as of recording, Republicans, even Republican officials, have been seriously priming Americans for the argument that Trump should get a third term and how that's actually okay
Damn, that
under the
hairline is
Constitution.
brutal.
We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president.
Or is it constitutional for President Trump to run for a third term? He's teasing that.
You know, if you read the Constitution, it says it's not, but he says he has some different
A
circumstances.
very sober-looking
that,
piano,
might be
playing
able
a
to go
rather
around the
drunken
Constitution, but
rendition of
that's
Enrique
up to you.
Granado's 12 Spanish dances.
So you're open to it?
Well,
Nothing about the
I think
hairline.
that,
That's
there's going to have to be an
a bigger
evaluation.
woman.
Not even George W. Bush, who was very, very bad. The fact that he's the last Republican president before Trump has managed to whitewash his past. He was not good. Don't let the old painting sad man stuff fool you. But as bad as he was, he never would have thought of sending troops in the military and the National Guard to American cities and states that he didn't like. But Trump is threatening to send American troops to low-crime cities like Portland, stating that they need to be cleaned up, ignoring the much more dangerous cities in red states. And the right eats this all up. Mind you, and this will be a recurring theme, none of this is really helping anyone, let alone many of the working class white people who voted for Trump. While Trump's appeal is more diverse than people like to believe, this is just something you have to acknowledge. At the end of the day, his base, like all Republicans for years, has been among uneducated whites and rural white people. People who, for the most part, have never benefited from his policies. For example, regarding the ongoing government shutdown that is still in place as of writing, the shutdown is happening because Republicans want to make major cuts to many social safety net programs, which will impact poor Americans. And despite the efforts of Republicans for decades to make it seem like the poor are only undeserving black and brown people, leeching off the government, the majority of Americans receiving those benefits are white. And these same white people will support Trump literally to their death. Why is this the case? And what does it have to do with Charlie Kirk? To make sense of that, I want to dive into the concept of the culture war, because it's through the culture war that all of this is possible. And they know this because Charlie Kirk actually named his college tour the Culture War Tour. So switching gears for a second, if you're at all on Twitter and social media in the months and weeks preceding the murder of Charlie Kirk, you probably caught wind of two other tragic killings. The killings of Austin Metcalf and Irina Zarutska both went viral on Twitter, as these were two young white lives ended by black men. Both of those black men, mind you, faced immediate legal charges. I want to be clear, it's genuinely sad, and I send condolences to their families regardless of the circumstances of their death. It's tragic when people die like this, especially when their deaths have become flashpoints in culture wars online. Austin Metcalf's father in particular showed an inspirational level of grace in the aftermath of his son's death that should be commended. Unfortunately, that father's grace is not being copied by the American right, who used his son's death to talk about black fatigue. Not the original use of that term, by the way, but a racist version that is basically white people getting tired of not being able to be openly racist. Similarly, Zaruska's death spurred legislative initiatives to reinstate and even expedite the death penalty in North Carolina, which, yikes, is really all I can say to that. And this is all after President Trump weaponized the deaths of white women at the hands of immigrants all through his campaign trail as a way to bolster his anti-immigrant agenda. And now we have ICE kidnapping people off the street and even in churches, gyms, and public schools.
I want you to take a look at something
Aren't you
that
mad
just
your
came
aunt left you
about
out of her will?
2 days ago. We made a tape, which I'm going to show
Stole
you.
a
and
treasure
it's
map.
a tape of a great
That made
mother
me feel
who I
better.
got to know a little bit at one of
Then
the
I discovered
rallies.
there
Tonight
was no
accused of
treasure.
killing a 12-year-old
That
girl.
made me feel mad
Police say
again.
these men
Then I
strangled
started
her
sniffing
before
stuff.
dumping her into
That
that
sorted the whole
creek.
thing out.
Both men were in the country illegally.
Did
There
you
are
say
hundreds and
treasure
even
map?
thousands of cases like that, and it's people
You
coming
still
into this
have
country
that.
that are horrible people.
And as I saw these stories explode online and invigorate an already foaming at the mouth population of racist conservatives, I couldn't help but think to myself,
And people above me.
but what about white on white crime? What about Vincent Bolletaro, the young Charlie Kirk fan who murdered 2 teenage girls whom he had been stalking for what seemed like months, even after getting a restraining order against them? By the way, Bolletaro's family is connected to law enforcement, but clearly they're very picky about who they need to protect and serve. Or what about insert countless other stories of white women murdered by white men since the beginning of time? Gabby Petito, Lacey Peterson, Natalie Holloway, the little girl that John Benet Ramsey. I've been seeing that girl's face since I was a child. It's actually cursed. Surely other young white women had been murdered in North Carolina. Were their deaths not worthy of attempting to reinstate the death penalty? What is it about DeCarlos Brown, the severely mentally ill black man that killed Ariana, that warrants such a response? Do you think that black men are the most pressing danger to white women in this country? If you do, it's probably because you're racist and low-key sexist, but I know I only have so much room with y'all right now.
Oh my
You
God.
can bet money,
I'm gonna give it
like
to,
literally,
what's her face?
don't
The
make
Earring
this
girl.
bet because
She
you'll
has
lose
nothing
it.
in her
That if a
personality, right?
young
Maybe
white
it'll
woman is
wake
murdered in
something
North
up in her.
Carolina, it will probably
It'll
be
have
from
you
her
bouncing
white
off the walls if you
boyfriend
take too
or
much.
husband. Because all crime
Okay,
in this
maybe I'll save
country
it
is
for later.
intraracial. At least 80% of white victims of violent crime, the perpetrator of that violence is also white. White people make up 74% of familial violence victims, meaning child abuse, domestic violence, and familicide, which
you want
makes
some Coke?
sense because
Snuff?
most family violence offenders are white, and females make up 80% of the victims for family violence, again, usually killed by a boyfriend or
need this
husband,
dangerous
very
man to
rarely
sit
a
with.
stranger,
No, you
and
should.
considering that only around 10% of black men have a
I'll
white
ask her if she
spouse,
wants it.
the biggest threat to any white woman in this country by far is a straight white man.
I'll
And
need
that
a
goes
shovel
not
though,
just for
right?
murder, but also assault and especially rape and molestation. Yet somehow, new laws form when a black man is the perpetrator, as if it's the right of white men
that's
to
not
abuse,
outside.
harm, and kill women that
have
look
a
like them.
bridge or
And it doesn't
anything.
require new laws for putting convicts to death when they do.
different
And don't get me
location.
wrong, the rate of intimate partner violence in the black community is awful in so many ways, but don't all lives matter, y'all? Surely we shouldn't only focus on black people in this situation, not if what we actually care about are these innocent white lives.
All right, well.
And isn't this kind of gross?
Take a drink.
Is this what y'all watch me for? Some of y'all, that's what y'all want out of me. Ugh. I hate it. I hate y'all so much. Sure, when you go low, going lower is a thing, but at the end of the day,
Maybe just
bringing up
wake it
white
back up.
crime statistics in this way should just really make you feel icky.
Recreational.
It's too much
Comics
like the
won't help
stuff
with that. Okay, yeah.
they
Alright.
do. You know, further, it's not like any racist in the audience will suddenly be convinced to rethink their ways based on this information. And I'll come back to this in a moment, but this is not how actual minds are changed in reality.
Hello.
If racism or any other ism were an issue of logic and information,
won't talk.
would have solved that issue years ago. But it's very clear after literal generations of learning and educating that no amount of explaining the
seems to be
truth to racists
scrutinizing a
changes the
marriage
way they see things. Racism's power to endure for so long in this country isn't due to hate.
Excuse me.
I hate that we talk about racism, actual damage they do with their
guy
racism,
looks like
because they
someone
don't necessarily feel hatred in their hearts when they do it, and they're probably correct. Racism isn't about hate, it's about indifference to harm being done to people
won't talk
that
to
don't
you.
look like you, especially
all
if
too
that
busy
harm
trying to
is
steal my
useful for how
inheritance.
you maintain your own status quo. Racism is still here because it has utility as an organizing
lawyer
social
discussing-
framework
oh, wait, we already did.
for white Americans. The role racism plays in this country is for building consensus in community. It's almost ritualistic in its use.
I am a Western chauvinist. And I refuse to apologize. I refuse to apologize.
jokes. White youth for a generation have made racist jokes, not as an expression of hate, but almost as an initiation into whiteness as a concept, performing the agreement amongst each other that blackness is beneath them and unworthy of sanctity. This is why racist group chats exist so prominently, such as the one the young Republicans got caught on earlier this year. This is why white kids on Omegle and other chat random sites and Call of Duty lobbies hurl slurs from the safety of their perceived anonymity, going all the way back to slavery. This is why poor whites had astoundingly low standards of living, but fought for the Confederacy because it preserved their way of life, as wretched as that way of life was. The lynchings of black people during slavery going into Jim Crow was often a community gathering or festival environment for white people. They would make flyers and sell food as they watched black bodies burn and hang from the poplar trees. Then afterwards, some would even take their body parts as souvenirs. Feel free to Google this. I am not making this up. The biggest falsehood about racism is that it's about the hatred of any group of people. But in reality, racism is about a perverse love for whiteness and the love language through which that is expressed. And this is just the overt stuff that whites will admit you shouldn't do. We shouldn't lynch people. We shouldn't say the N-word. They keep doing it and saying it's a joke, but they know they shouldn't. And the reason why that is still such a focus is because it serves as the cover for the much more harmful systemic racism that most whites, including Charlie Kirk, would never even admit exists.
There is nothing fascistic about deporting people in your country that are here illegally, securing your borders, and putting your own people first. How many of you students out there feel as if you'd be graded differently if you come out as a conservative or a Trump supporter? Raise your hand. Look around. That's fascism. That is definitional fascism.
Do you think, for all that I just said, do you think a few cherry-picked statistics and some witty clapbacks is going to change this? No. This is the culture war.
And busy schedule to meet with us, the grassroots. We're fighting on college campuses every single day. We're fighting for the next generation. And to know that we have the backing of the most successful president of our generation means the world. Because look, we are in a culture war right now. We're fighting for free speech, for free markets, and for American exceptionalism. And to have the president take time out of his schedule to meet with us, to just exchange some ideas really, really means the world. And look, this is a battle that we're going to win.
And beyond that, we spoke about the black community and black issues.
I can't stress enough how important culture wars are to the American right and to American politics in general. And this is because culture wars have effectively replaced actual politics for most people, right and left.
God damn it.
But specifically for the right, it has been instrumental in convincing many people to vote against their best interests. When regular people are surveyed about policies, they almost always lean toward more progressive policies, more taxing the rich, less government in people's personal lives, sensible gun control laws, etc. It's not universal. Many Americans support tougher border laws, for example, but very few desire to see what's actually been happening under Trump since he's been elected. Even attitudes on abortion rights consistently fall to the left of Republican policies. Conservative voters constantly vote against their self-interest, whether they realize it or not. And even in moments where they do realize it, they still don't care because, as I've been saying, this is a cult and the culture wars are their, deep lore text. The culture wars, ironically, are proof that facts actually should care about feelings because people have been using feelings to override facts in this country for 100+ years. There's so many examples of this, both historical and recent. One is that conservatives were more likely to die from COVID due to vaccine hesitancy and resistance to masking. Despite the fact that science, logic, and so much information was telling them that masking and vaccines would save their lives, so many conservatives were literally, I remember vividly, I'll see if I can find the clip, a guy that was on a respirator talking about how he doesn't regret not getting a vaccine or masking, and then he died 2 days later.
I immediately asked Christopher, why hadn't he gotten the vaccine?
I'm more of a libertarian, and I don't like being told what I have to do. I'm still not completely 100% sold on the inoculation.
It was eerie to hear Christopher insist on his individual freedoms, even as he struggled to breathe.
You think I probably should have had a little healthier fear that will need to be taken more seriously?
He has 2 fistfuls of paper, a can-do attitude.
I don't know how close I am to being a lot worse. I really don't know.
Christopher Green died 9 days after this interview. He was 53 years old.
It doesn't take much to find countless examples of conservatives directly being hurt by Trump's policies on tariffs or ICE crackdowns, people's mail order brides being deported, and it's often people who voted for him. And whether or not they regret it is up for grabs. But understand, pointing this out about Trump is low-hanging fruit because it's been everyone since the beginning of time in this country, especially when it comes to conservative ideology. For example, consider free healthcare, something that the rest of the developed world has had for more than half a century, and it should and would be here in America if not for the utilization of culture wars. Numerous American presidents from a variety of political standpoints, going back to the early 1900s, have tried to create a universal healthcare system that was free to Americans, but were stymied by capitalistic and conservative entities using emotionally manipulative culture war methods of convincing the masses that having free healthcare was somehow not in their best interest.
President Truman was reelected largely on a campaign for a single-payer national health plan, and the Democratic Party gained control of Congress. At the same time, Americans were on edge after World War II, and a lot of that fear was placed broadly on the construct of communism. This fear towards communism and communists, which infested the world through the Cold War, became known as the Red Scare. Opponents of the WMD healthcare bill took advantage of these fears to squander its success. The AMA was one of these opponents, and with help from public relations firm Whitaker and Baxter, launched one of the largest lobbying efforts of its time. The group spent over $4.5 million, $48 million in today's dollars, on advertisements, newspapers, magazines, letters, and radio stations across the country. Slogans played on communist fears with titles such as "A Threat to Health" and "A Threat to Freedom," and utilized the term socialized medicine whenever possible. Public opinion in support of government health insurance fell from 74% in 1942 to 51% by 1949, just a year after President Truman was voted into office.
The same thing happened with the New Deal back in the 1930s. Was the New Deal the 1930s? Am I tripping? Don't make fun of me. Yeah, okay. The New Deal was at its core a socialist work program that lifted millions of Americans into the middle class out of poverty. But it only passed because it was initially designed to exclude undeserving Black Americans as much as possible. However, after political wins for Black people, such as the Civil Rights Bill, fair housing laws, etc., this required New Deal government programs to be more accessible to all Americans. And you see white Americans quickly turn against the very policies that induced the golden age of American prosperity in the 1950s and 60s. Even today, the very idea that people should get free healthcare is somehow controversial and un-American, even as millions of white Americans suffer and go broke due to healthcare costs. A fun fact to never forget is that white people poured cement into their own swimming pools to ensure that Black people could not swim with them. Conservative political positions are positions to maintain systems of dominance and exclusion, even if those most dominated and excluded are white people, all cloaked in the rhetoric of personal responsibility. Charlie Kirk himself railed against the idea that the government might offer free lunches to school children, claiming that the problem with school children was obesity and not food insecurity.
Do you think that there should be free school lunch for all children?
No.
Why?
Of course not. Because parents should feed their kids, not the government.
What if they can't?
Go get a job. Show me a single child in America going hungry. Doesn't exist. Number two, we have churches, we have food shelters, we have billions, and it does not exist. We have a child obesity problem, not a child starvation problem in this country.
Refusing to recognize that those problems are connected and that there's tons of evidence that literally millions of American children need free lunches, and that it would be incredibly beneficial to those children and thus society as a whole to get them. In this clip, Kirk yells, "Get a job," and the crowd laughs because they still operate on the image of Black welfare queens, not realizing that the average recipient of food stamps is a single white woman with 2 kids. Mind you, the woman originally used to demonize the concept of welfare and called the welfare queen was a white woman.
Her name was Linda Taylor, and
Okay,
she was
what's her
identified by the Chicago Tribune in 1974 as a person who had committed welfare fraud while driving fancy cars, including a Cadillac. And very quickly after that, she was given the nickname the Welfare Queen.
It is accurate to say that a higher percentage of black children suffer from food insecurity in this country, something like 20 to 30% of black children, or around 2.3 million kids. And white children suffer from food insecurity at a much lower rate, somewhere around 7%. But we live in a predominantly white country, so that 7% adds up to close to 4 million white children whose parents need to get a job, so the rest of us don't have to pay a few extra dollars on our taxes to help their children not starve and not grow up being statistically more likely to end up dead or in jail. Ironically, paying for school lunches up front means paying less for jails, healthcare, and welfare later in their lives. But because of people like Charlie Kirk, many conservatives would rather those 4 million children starve if it means those who are undeserving suffer. Even now, as the government is preparing to shut down, conservatives are mocking people who won't be able to feed themselves. But here's the real power of this cult, of the culture war. Some of these same people doing the mocking were themselves once on SNAP benefits. Some of these same poor white moms of those 4 million kids are still likely going to vote Republican in 2028. And I want to correct the common sentiment from progressives that says it's because they're dumb. They're not dumb. Delusional maybe, but they just fully believe in the worldview they've been sold. And this begs the question, why and how? These decisions actively make America worse for everyone, not just black people or gay people or immigrants, everyone. And most of the people who suffer are white. And many of those suffering also support their own suffering. Why and how? To answer that is super complex, and I don't know all of it. But I know a big factor that brings us back to Charlie Kirk is his role in the culture wars and his job of recruitment and reinforcing of the moral standards of the right by using those culture wars to galvanize and build consensus with their base. And this is most prominent through the media. Today, that is YouTube and podcasts, but for a while, it was TV and radio. And that's where the foundation lies, in media manipulation. And to understand that, you have to start with good old Satan himself, Ronald Wilson Reagan, 666. This man is undefeated in how often something bad comes back to him. In this situation, it's the 1987 ending of a policy called the Fairness Doctrine. You may have heard right-wing pundits at times try to make this seem like this doctrine would silence them and make it so they wouldn't be able to have the right to be on air, but that's not really accurate. The end result probably would change the way that all politics are discussed in media, but what the Fairness Doctrine really was making media companies more responsible for the type of topics they covered on air. Essentially, you couldn't have something like Fox News before the 1980s, and the same could be said for MSNBC, because the Fairness Doctrine basically said that if you have opinions of a political or controversial nature, you have to have both sides of that opinion, and they have to be presented in an earnest and direct manner, unless you can legit get fined by the FCC. Thus, it was hard to use media to exclusively promote any political agenda. There was political discourse in media before then, but it was much more measured and straightforward, more educational, and far less entertaining. Hence the many TV broadcast interviews of political figures, even radical ones like a Malcolm X. With the Fairness Doctrine gone, our politics became another framework for just being entertainment, just as subject to media manipulation and sensationalism in the name of ratings and marketing versus education and seeking the truth. Today, our political media looks more like something from Monday Night Football or professional wrestling, and entire networks of channels can push explicit and clear political agendas. And now there are large groups of Americans who only get their news from overtly biased sources. And no, this video is not sponsored by Ground News, but it is sponsored by Nebula. We can talk about that real quick. If you're enjoying this video analyzing white culture and conservatives thus far, you might also appreciate the short mini doc I did on Nebula called Talking to White People, which was greatly have to answer to, and we want to keep it that way. We want to make without the we have, along with my short film talking that can't be found anywhere that and airway. So now you have companies like the far-right leading Sinclair Media owning most local TV stations in the country and purposely seeding right-wing perspectives into their coverage and being blatantly manipulative in their efforts to control media narratives, as seen in this horrifying but real clip of their many news stations reading the same script.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media publish things aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the community use their platforms to push their own personal bias and
other companies, they all own all the local news and they all get some
extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So with these two things in place, we now have the environment set for people like a Charlie Kirk to wield immense power in pushing cultural narratives and swaying public and political influence. They just didn't quite know it yet. And Kirk comes in the late 2010s, but he's following in a tradition of right-wing talking heads, normalizing certain far-right talking points. And here's where we meet the most important character in the history of the culture wars, and possibly one of the most influential political figures to never hold an office, Rush Limbaugh.
Folks, there's actually a debate going on ESPN and throughout the sports world over who can use the N-word, when, and how. The white race has probably had fewer slaves and for a briefer period of time than any other in the history of the world.
What are the similarities between the Democrat Party of today and the Nazi Party?
Rush Limbaugh is greatly responsible for today's political reality. There is no Trump, no Fox News, probably no Manosphere, and definitely not a modern culture war without him. He is patient zero for the awful timeline we're in right now. Ironically, Limbaugh was the failed son of a prominent political family whose only talent was yapping at a time where that talent only had one medium to be successful, which was radio. And Limbaugh loved radio and worked in it on and off growing up until he got to college, and then he dropped out of college to focus on being a DJ full-time in his early 20s and was not very successful until he found his calling as a right-wing provocateur. And this wasn't a new thing for American radio at the time, but to give the devil his due, Limbaugh was extremely talented as an orator.
Barney admitting that he had had the affair with Stephen Goby, and he said, quote, I was just trying to help this guy through some problems, but I got suckered. That's what drove me to My Boy Lollipop. My Boy Lollipop. Perfect. It was absolutely perfect. I don't think that is making fun of the homosexual lifestyle.
Because of the Fairness Doctrine and the Telecommunications Act, the value of his voice skyrocketed and spread throughout the nation. In his book, Talk Radio is America, How an Industry Took Over a Political Party That Took Over the United States, Brian Rosenwald explains how, with the Fairness Doctrine gone, radio stations learned to streamline their content for market optimization, making all-day conservative talk shows a strong branding strategy, partially due to the fact that newer FM radio was clearer and better for music, but couldn't reach as far as AM radio, and listeners were fine listening to lower quality signals for talk radio, meaning that it was rural Americans well outside of city centers that was their key market demographic, playing into certain conservative and regressive ideologies around people and social issues, etc., was great for galvanizing that community. And this coincided with the aforementioned rise in media consolidation, as well as the vision of people like Newt Gingrich, who recognized where politics would fail, culture wars could prevail. And so what we have is our first ever basically algorithmic bubble, where a whole community of people are cocooned in a specific view of the world without ever being exposed to opposite opinions, and then enriched and radicalized and having everything about that reality turned up to 10 to the point where we are today. We're at a point now where Charlie Kirk is saying things that Limbaugh would have been taken off of air for in the 90s.
Taylor Swift might de-radicalize herself, engage in reality more, and get outside of the abstract clouds. Reject feminism. Submit to your husband, Taylor.
Again, the point is always to push the envelope on what can be deemed normal and civil, and that's what these people have been and are continuing to do. Republican politicians courted Limbaugh's favor. He makes visits to the White House. He advises presidents. He gets more and more influential. Mind you, in this same time, both Barack Obama and Bill Clinton served 8-year terms. So he isn't all powerful in terms of actual sentiment for most Americans, which is something that's important to remember, but I'll come back to that later. But the nature of our politics is fundamentally altered in terms of polarization and what counts as a political platform. Instead of actually talking about policies on helping American people with jobs and healthcare and the economy and even safety, it just becomes, are trans people playing sports with your children? Are gay people kissing each other? Are black people existing? The most effective commercial, and this has been proven in the previous American cycle, was this commercial about Kamala Harris talking about trans people, using the slogan, Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you.
Every transgender inmate would have access.
Okay, now he's gonna hurl and I'll get what I needed.
President Trump is for you. I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
That is a proven thing that worked more than anything else that the Republicans put out there. That should tell you something about the power of the culture wars. Mind you, there was also liberal and progressive media and content doing the same thing. Jon Stewart rises during this same time, as does NPR. Liberals even tried to mimic talk radio with the failed Air America, but it was not good enough to shift the Overton window with this significant amount of Americans who, if we're honest, liberals weren't paying attention to. The country as a whole didn't seem to realize what was happening in middle America this entire time. A lot of especially modern liberals don't recognize is that Obama and Bill Clinton moved the Democrats to the right. Yes, they did. Stop arguing about this bullshit. Look it up yourselves. Do the fucking Googles. And Clinton specifically pushed the Democrats right in a way that gave Republicans two options. Either move left, which was out the question, or move further right, which is what they did with the help of Limbaugh. They vilified everything the Democrats did, even if the Democrats were doing exactly what the Republicans wanted to do, such as the '94 crime bill or the welfare reform bill, both under Bill Clinton, or Obamacare, which got its origins from Mitt Romney's healthcare plan. What Limbaugh and the culture wars did was make it that even working with Democrats to make the government functional and help a small amount of people was seen as a heinous betrayal to the conservative reality and ideology. He helped create the image of Democrats as godless communists who hate America, and that impact reverberates through conservative spaces and leadership to this day. In that process, Hillary Clinton became a supervillain even before she ever held any type of office. So when she ran in 2016, unbeknownst to many liberals in the Democratic Party, she was fighting essentially 20 years of negative campaigning to millions of Americans. The blue wall had cracks in it for decades and nobody noticed. And let's be clear here. It wasn't hard to make the Clintons look bad in middle America. The Democrats had long since abandoned the working class in favor of neoliberalism. They serve the same corporate overlords that the Republicans do. They participate in the same behavior that exploits and harms American people. They just do it with nicer words and a more diverse cast. Please understand that Democrats had their own culture war strategy of paying lip service to racial minorities, immigrants, and the LGBTQ community, but never doing enough to actually help them outside of grand gestures and empty promises. Even today, whenever we see figures in the Democratic Party that are more progressive and are more trying to get away from corporately owned politics, people like Bernie Sanders, Jamal Bowman, and Zohran Mamdani, the Democrats prefer establishment figures owned by corporations instead and do everything they can to undermine those movements, which is why Democrats constantly lose. Meanwhile, NAFTA, started under Reagan but signed by Clinton, expedites the mass erosion of jobs in middle America. And this leads to poverty and dysfunction in those areas that turn into hotbeds for opioids and meth and heroin in white populations. And then here's Rush Limbaugh and his cohorts such as Sean Hannity, Michael Medved, Herman Cain, etc., explaining that their problems, the problems of these white people in these rural towns in middle America and in the South, those problems that they're experiencing are the result of the Clintons, the Obamas, immigrants, critical race theory, and eventually trans kids playing soccer, the woke mind virus, and postmodern neo-Marxism. And it's worked beautifully for well over a decade now. And so Trump won in 2016 and liberals were shocked and did it again in 2024. But don't mistake this for the country moving more right. It's just the country responding to its natural right-wing disposition. It's because the right is winning the culture wars. It is clearly apparent that the right isn't doing much to create new ways for Americans to thrive and be successful. No one believes in trickle-down economics and probably never have. Republicans haven't been the party of small government since Dwight Eisenhower. But they know policies don't matter as long as they promise to hurt the people that their followers hate. And in that regard, they're doing an amazing job. And this is the role Charlie Kirk really played. He wasn't God, family, country, all that shit. He was meant to be a provocateur, but not to like galvanize the masses, but to collect those already interested in the rhetoric that the right presents and radicalize them into devoted followers who will support the right no matter what, no matter if it's actually hurting them. What conservatives require are cult members. They require people who are more interested in winning the culture war than their own well-being. People immune to facts and logic. This will come up later, but understand the modern right isn't this huge, overbearing mass of people. What it is a well-organized, highly motivated mass that can in unison move and influence everything about our political reality. I talked about it in my election results video that Trump had hundreds of thousands of votes in swing states where voters didn't even bother to vote for any other candidates or issues on their ballots. These voters weren't politically inclined or informed. They just came to vote for Trump as a part of his cult of personality. That's what the right has understood for decades now. It's what they learned from Limbaugh and why even today, as they get exposed for all kinds of corruptions, openly court Trump to defy the Constitution or get caught having racist group chats, they never apologize, never admit wrong, never play defense, because their most valued followers don't want that and don't need that from them. Never forget Trump saying, "Stand back and stand by," when asked to denounce white supremacists. That wasn't an accident or a misspeak, that is intentional. A small group of highly dedicated, well-organized, and mobilized believers is all they need under the circumstances, because those folks do the work. They do the evangelizing, they do the recruiting, and they come out to vote, which is really all they need when the Democrats are as weak and feckless and genocidal as they are. And thus, America has steadily moved further right in pretty much every meaningful way for most of my lifetime. Sure, gay people can get married for now. You might even see a gay kiss on TV every once in a while. For now. And there were some DEI workshops and some donations to black schools or whatever after George Floyd was murdered. But never forget that after a year of protests and riots in the name of George Floyd, all these people shouting defund the police, that the government's response was to raise police budgets nationwide. This country is as right as it's ever been. Policing hasn't changed. The rich continue to get richer as the poor get poorer. Corporations own our data, our ways of communicating with each other, and even our access to art. The country is still hella segregated. Women no longer have the right to abortion. There's still no free healthcare. You can still buy AR-15 the same place you can buy Pokemon cards. Military police are invading American cities and kidnapping people off the street. And America is still an imperious superpower supporting and funding numerous genocides across the globe. Aside from a few victories here and there and some dynamic changes, the right has been winning the political game via the culture wars for a while now. This doesn't mean we stop fighting. In fact, we're in a better position than we've been in decades on the opposite end of this spectrum. But let's not be delusional on where the ledger stands. All that said, something else occurred to me when I saw Charlie Kirk get shot in the neck and the ensuing aftermath, and that maybe winning the culture war isn't the goal here, because the winners of the culture war seem more like losers. Part 2, who was Charlie Kirk? I barely knew who Charlie Kirk was before he died.
Do you truly, in your heart of hearts, truly believe that this is a human being? This?
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt?
Yes.
This is a dolphin fetus. This is a human fetus. Look how similar they look. In life, do you confuse dolphins for human babies often?
Regular watchers will know I don't engage in rage-bait content much. For all the accusations I get of catering to white liberals, this is my first conservatives are bad video in like 3 years, because I don't like attracting those types of viewers. I don't watch or listen to conservative pundits. I don't make content about the ridiculous things they say or do. I legit could barely tell the difference between him and Tucker Carlson, because they all fit in the same mold that I just described earlier. However, they're trying to make him into a martyr. They're trying to make him on the same line as Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, to lionize him as a sympathetic figure who only wanted what was best for people in America and had deep, meaningful beliefs about free speech and open dialogue and getting past differences. God, family, country, in that order. And to the untrained ear who doesn't know the reality, who could hate that? But I know that Charlie Kirk started out by targeting people for free speech, by targeting college professors and trying to silence them on college campuses for saying anything that was in any way progressive. I know that these same people who say God, family, country will gladly persecute you for not worshiping their God, kill your family, and put you out the country. Of many things I'm gonna expose about Kirk, the main thing that should tell you the type of person he is that he's the only conservative pundit that I can think of in my lifetime to legitimately and publicly criticize Martin Luther King in any real way.
When the New York riots happen, it goes for like a week. It goes for about a week. He's telling King, you've got to say something to condemn this. And King says he doesn't want to do it because he says, I don't want to deliver a condemnation without also condemning the causes that lead to riots.
That sounds like BLM. I wanted to make sure that, after that conversation, we talk about the positives. And then we also get into some of the other implications of this. We're a truth-seeking show. But I can say declaratively, this guy is not worthy of a national holiday. He is not worthy of godlike status. In fact, I think it's really harmful.
Most conservatives aren't bold enough to engage with MLK critically. Instead, they like to use the sanitized version of King to push their right-wing agenda. But maybe, I guess to his credit, Kirk has purposely brought up King's radicalism as a way to undermine him, likely in preparation for Project 2025 and the purging of civil rights that we see they're clearly trying to attempt. Notice how Kirk talks about the Civil Rights Bill and his issues with it. He doesn't get very specific, does he?
Imagine what happened during 2020 with even more murdering, and imagine just remember how angry we got when CNN called it mostly peaceful.
Exactly.
And this is one of the reasons why MLK's numbers went down towards the end of his life.
He doesn't spell out the problem. He just insinuates that a problem is there, and he expects everyone else watching to know where he wants to go, but he can't quite go there yet publicly.
The Civil Rights Act was a new founding where we decided to discard the U.S. Constitution and reconstitute the story, the mantra, the creed, and the vision of America. And you even see this in Republican circles as well. Well, they say, well, the Civil Rights Act corrected a lot of the errors of the Constitution. No, it didn't. The Civil Rights Act was a completely new creation. Of course, it was well intended by some. We have acknowledged that many times. But the Civil Rights Act at its core was a new founding. It was the discard what happened prior. The Constitution says people have equal rights. Imagine just treating people equally. The Civil Rights Act does not treat people equally because the legal theory under the Civil Rights Act is disparate impact. And so therefore you can't arrest a bunch of criminals in DC because you might be disproportionately arresting black men, and that might be deemed as racist.
And this is a very intentional thing that Kirk and folks like him do. They're always just asking questions or having a conversation. And I bring this up because the first thing that people need to get on board with is recognizing that Kirk's whole shtick of open dialogue and debate is a bait and switch tactic, not meant to actually pursue truth and a better understanding of modern issues, but to normalize certain ideas, spread them as much as possible, and then harness the power that comes from that. There was once a time that agreeing that your 10-year-old daughter would have to have a baby by her rapist was considered weird, but here's Charlie Kirk doing it for millions of viewers to see.
So if you had a daughter and she was 10 and she got raped, and she was going to give birth and she would and she was going to give birth and she was going to live, would you want her to go through that and carry her baby?
That's awfully graphic.
It's no, but it's a real life scenario that happens to many people.
The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered.
And then he just continues on as he is, as if that's not the worst thing you've heard today. And it's because Charlie Kirk's fans either don't notice or don't care. But being wrong and weird on a large scale for everyone to see is the point. Kirk and his ilk aren't trying to convert normal people or those who disagree. He's seeking out the select few who are amenable to his extreme beliefs or indifferent to them as long as it serves their overall agenda. This is also why he focused on the least capable opponents for making content. While Kirk is presented as this great intellect or debater,
in life, you confuse dolphins for human babies often.
Most of his debates and his debate wins come from debating 19-year-olds using well-rehearsed talking points and skills of sophistry to make his fundamentally awful opinion seem reasonable and possibly even logical. Much like people like Ben Shapiro and Steven Crowder before him, he recognized that arguing with college kids was an excellent formula for churning out content for the right-wing media apparatus.
9 out of 13 states had abolished slavery by the Constitution. Northwest Ordinance had all new territories were free.
So much crazy stuff and what do you take from that? That America wasn't racist?
Not only that, we were the first country to abolish slavery, not just continue the practice of it.
Charlie, you have to understand, you're not an unintelligent person. You know that's a logical fallacy.
Why?
The right has for decades targeted college campuses as college kids make for easy targets of derision. Colleges are where young people go through many transitions and develop unrefined belief systems that they paradoxically feel incredibly strong about, making them easy targets for gotcha moments and very satisfying to see put in their place. Thus, they are great for farming content to the anti-intellectual crowd. And that's often what happened in these viral moments on right-wing online spaces. Remember, Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro, these are adults with entire teams behind them who do this for a living, challenging some 19-year-old who probably stayed up till 2 a.m. the night before playing Call of Duty that took maybe 1 or 2 sociology classes and wants to step up to the table. It's not a fair fight. It's the equivalent to watching Razor Ramon fight local jobber number 595, except the crowd doesn't understand that the match is predetermined.
Say hello to the bad guy.
However, when people like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro face people who are actually well-versed in their topics or relatively well-trained in rhetoric, they will usually get demolished.
This is a dolphin fetus.
See Kirk debating college students at Cambridge or against Brianna Joy Gray.
Systemic racism. I could sit here and ask you, Charlie, do you know how many people came over in the transatlantic slave trade?
I could approximate about 1.8 million.
No, it's like 20 million.
Hold on,
Are you
20 million came as slaves?
20 million.
I'm making a simple observation, which is objectively true regardless. The women of the West are miserable, and we should tell them to stop freezing their eggs and start finding their partner earlier and have lots of babies.
If you actually care about women's happiness, then the solution is to structurally support them. That means universal childcare, shared legally enforceable parental leave, and in Nordic countries where women have high workforce participation and also some state support, they report higher life satisfaction than in more conservative countries, including America. So if your metric is...
Just you said it's bad.
Thank you.
The 2 minutes that Kirk had facing Dean Withers on that Jubilee episode were rough enough that Kirk seemingly kept ducking Withers for the rest of that year. Dean was actually finally supposed to debate Kirk a few weeks after he was murdered, something that Dean took very, very hard.
Nobody deserves that. Not even Charlie Kirk.
When Kirk went to Cambridge in the UK and faced up against students who've actually put in significant effort and preparation, he was so clearly outmatched that his own channel comment section took the side of the woke feminists. So there it is. Charlie Kirk beaten by facts and logic in the marketplace of ideas. Feminism wins, the right loses, nothing else to worry about, right? Wrong, obviously.
Oh my God, that's
and this is because
Kirk
isn't in it for debates or the pursuit of truth or intellectual discourse or even winning the debate half the time. He's in it for the purpose I mentioned earlier of breaking containment, saying inflammatory things that he may or may not even be sincere about. I'm focusing on this because many people on the right and plenty of liberals like Ezra Klein believe certain things about Charlie and open dialogue that are just not true and fundamentally harmful. They think that people with opinions similar to Charlie Kirk must be openly defeated in the marketplace of ideas, and they take Kirk's political intentions of having dialogue and discussion at face value, saying Kirk did politics the right way, but this is so stupidly naive it makes my head hurt. Plus, it's just not based in reality. Here's Kirk, a man who didn't even finish college, insulting multiple highly successful black women with advanced degrees and high achievements, insinuating that their success is only a product of affirmative action based solely on them being given opportunities because they were black.
I may have been admitted on affirmative action, both in terms of being a woman and a woman of color, but I can declare that I did not graduate on affirmative action. This is my personal story.
You really have to wonder. In fact, you know, if we would have said 3 weeks ago, Blake, if we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know
Diablo.
you do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
He insults their brain processing power and assumes that their job should have went to more qualified white men. He gives no actual argument for this, no material evidence to support this. It's just evident on face value from his perspective because of their race and this distortion of what affirmative action must be. The racism is so inherent that he's not even capable of understanding that what he's talking about is why affirmative action was created. When these women speak on benefiting from affirmative action, what they're pointing out is that before affirmative action, they would not have had the opportunity to reach the level of success they've reached. Not because they lack the brain processing power, but because racists like Charlie Kirk assumed that they couldn't and would never allow them the chance. And mind you, that still makes them rare because the most likely recipients of affirmative action have historically been white women. But in Kirk's mind, in the minds of most conservatives, racism only exists when people say slurs or openly admit it. And even then, we shouldn't talk about it too much. And none of this matters, again, because the point isn't to have a logical discussion where people learn something. It's to say something racist or sexist or homophobic out loud to his fan base and get away with it. Affirm the racist tendencies of his fans and build a coalition. I could talk hours if I wanted to about how wrong this statement of doing politics the right way is, as others have, but it doesn't make a difference because people like Kurt aren't here to be convinced. They're here to normalize their hateful rhetoric. Liberals and moderates watching, understand. If the ultimate goal is to reduce the damage that certain ideas cause, the best strategy is not to help them spread. Even if you think you're winning the optics in the moment, taking certain ideas out of the marketplace of ideas ends their ability to replicate. Yes, the dreaded deplatforming is our best weapon. There are drawbacks to it, yes, but understand that there's tons of research at this point that shows that no one really changes their mind from public debates. People don't change their mind just because they've been presented with better information on a topic. People will legit lie if they think it serves a greater communal good. So even if you have your cool Aaron Sorkin moment where you own the chuds, you're still not doing anything useful. It's team sports and entertainment, and our team will never win the actual major game going on with the strategy that we're going to convince them in the marketplace of ideas. And the right knows this. It's why they won't stop saying so much wild shit all the time. It's why they do not care if what they're saying is true or false, if it makes sense, if it doesn't, if it's an outright lie, or exactly the opposite that someone else said. And I hate our modern news media for not just saying this to them. Whenever someone on the right just lies in their face, they say, "Is that true?" And then puts the microphone right back to them like they didn't just lie a fucking second ago. Like a perfect example is listening to Trump talk about the Epstein files on the campaign trail.
There's a moment where you had some hesitation about Epstein, releasing some of the documents on Epstein. Why the hesitation?
I don't think I'm not involved. I never went to his island.
And listening to him talk about the shit now.
Mr. President, what did Jeffrey Epstein mean in his emails when he said you knew about the girls?
I know nothing about that. They would have been asked that a long time ago.
Sir,
Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead. Go ahead.
Charlie Kirk himself spoke on the Epstein files all the time, but clearly was told behind the scenes to stop.
Honestly, I'm done talking about Epstein for the time being. I'm going to trust my friends in the administration. I'm going to trust my friends in the government to do what needs to be done, solve it, balls in their hands. I've said plenty this last weekend.
And it was such a blatant reversal of his own opinions that surely some people should have woken up. But they did. Still no consequences, no change in behavior, no damage to their movement. We are living in a post-truth era. So why are we worried about having good faith debates with people who are obvious liars?
I was right.
One scary thing is the country has moved so far right in its general disposition, and
sacrifices at the altar.
Right-wing movement has been so effective in their rhetoric that they've managed to label Kirk as a moderate.
If you have unapologetic, ferocious anti-white racism, then young whites are going to find some very radical political positions. If you want young ladies to become more conservative, we should encourage and celebrate marriage. Get a mortgage, get married, and mate.
I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths.
That's a problem. If I help devil some of your pearls.
Sure, if you can find it appropriate. So I'll give you one.
2 pearls.
1 pearl.
Okay. What? And is it the head?
Problem. I will never explicitly. Which is
Wrong. What the?
Sacrifice.
Every single year,
So I have
so
to
that we
answer
can
right.
have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
And by the way, genetics matter. We should talk about genetics more. It's not racist to say that.
You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
He's saying these racist things, openly speaking on women not needing to be educated, just wanting to become mothers, defending gun violence in the name of liberty, etc. And it makes him a moderate because every once in a while, when an overt white supremacist comes to the stage, he shouts them down. But what you need to understand is that Republicans and their followers know it's all the same thing. You just can't say the quiet part out loud. Lee Atwater, the campaign manager for Ronald Reagan, said as much back in 1981 as they developed their culture war playbook.
You start out in 1954 by saying,
oh yeah, he's going to explain it.
By 1968, you can't say that hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like force busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and they're
excited for process. Processing. It must be processed, right? I think.
Blacks get hurt worse than white.
This is still where we are, but the truth is Kirk was just skilled at hiding the racism inherent in his movement. Many members of Turning Point USA were exposed for having their own racist text chats. It's just something white people do when they're not around us, or even when they are around us, to be honest. Kirk was a modern update on all the overtly racist pundit this country has seen. However, I want to talk about the one that I think most right-wing figures are mimicking today, George Lincoln Rockwell. Now, some of you may find it offensive to compare George Rockwell, an overt neo-Nazi, to Charlie Kirk, allegedly a moderate, an overt neo-Nazi. However, you'll find him and Rockwell believe pretty much the same thing. Rockwell attacked MLK in the Civil Rights Bill. Charlie Kirk took the same exact position 60 years later. Both alleged that he was a communist, which we'll give him that one. Yeah. MLK secretly based, made a whole video about it. It's fine. Rockwell believed in the Great Replacement theory. Charlie Kirk believes in the Great Replacement theory. Rockwell was anti-feminist and anti-gay, saying that he would allow gay men in his movement if they changed, but didn't believe in gay marriage.
I will say this, in my organization, I have men who were homosexuals. They were sucked into that filth, just like drunkards or dope fiends, and I have been able to rescue them. And I'm not a bit ashamed of that. I'll stand shoulder to shoulder with anyone on any day. The only thing I will not tolerate is a homosexual who is a homosexual.
Charlie Kirk says basically the same thing, always arguing about women being submissive, saying he's okay with gay people existing, but marriage is between a man and a woman.
Why can't marriage be allowed with two men or two women?
Allowed and what it is are two different things. Just strictly from what marriage has always been is the idea of two separate parts coming in a union to be able to have, hopefully, a lifelong partnership to raise kids, adopt kids, or have kids. It is the attraction of opposites. If you want to redefine marriage, that's fine, that's your contention, but I take a classical view of marriage.
Both were anti-immigration, both were college dropouts, both showed potential as provocateurs, which got the attention of rich benefactors. Harold Noel Aerosmith Jr. bankrolled Rockwell. Bill Montgomery saw similar potential in Kirk and helped him found Turning Point USA. Both were overtly anti-communist and anti-progressive. Both toured college campuses debating students and creating spectacle to bring attention to his cause. Both couched their politics in a false image of Christian faith based solely on whiteness. Both were even from the state of Illinois, with Rockwell being from Bloomington and Kirk being from Arlington Heights, future home of the Bears, which that's so bad. And there's one more similarity I'm gonna save for later. However, for a lot of you, this might be your first time ever hearing of George Rockwell. Hell, I didn't know much about him till earlier this year, and shout out to Westside Tyler for making a similar comparison between him and Charlie Kirk in a video just a few months back. But despite the fact that Rockwell was a well-known figure in the 60s during the civil rights movement, often trailing Martin Luther King on his speaking engagements and marches, he's been erased from our history, and the reason is obvious. Rockwell made one mistake. He said the quiet part out loud a lot.
Commander George Lincoln Rockwell, you are
the biggest
head
crime
of
I've
the
ever
American
seen.
Nazi Party?
Yes, sir.
How can you possibly justify leading an organization whose objectives are the liquidation of the Jews, the removal of the Negroes to Africa, and the turning of the United States into a fascist state?
Well, I don't know where you got those supposed objectives, but they're ridiculous. We have no such objectives. As you have said, we are not out to liquidate the Jews. We are out to liquidate communist traitors. Unfortunately, too many Jewish atheists, not religious Jews, but too many religious atheist Jews are mixed up in communism.
He was too honest about what the American right really was and what they wanted. He was too extreme, not in his rhetoric, much of which was popular then and is openly parroted by the American right now. No, his problem is that he openly called himself a Nazi. He did it at a time where Americans had spent years branding themselves as anti-Nazi, even though the Nazis modeled their genocide off of Jim Crow laws in America. They were still the bad guys to us then and still today. But his political platform was damn near identical to Trumpism.
Rockwell soon discovered that the well-educated and spirited Judith was nothing like the mental image of a wife, based on the demure and submissive Claire. He quickly eroded whatever relationship he had with the Altmans by blaming them for not training Judith for the proper, meaning docile and compliant role of a wife and mother, which was, in his view, the only appropriate station for a woman.
Submit to your husband, Taylor.
But unlike Kirk and so many figures on the right, he didn't play coy with plausible deniability. He didn't wink and nod with other white supremacists in the crowd. He didn't say stand back and stand by. He said literally white power. That's a book he wrote. He named one of his magazines The Stormtrooper, and one of his followers went on to write the Turner Diaries, the Bible of white supremacist fan fiction. So he is not mentioned in today's modern society and has been erased from history. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's interesting to consider that he himself has been erased, but not his rhetoric, especially since conservatives today have come to identify themselves with Nazis so much that making Nazis bad guys in movies and TV shows and video games is offensive to them. We just had a guy call himself a fascist on Jubilee to laughter and applause. But let's go back to that last similarity between Kirk and Rockwell I didn't speak on yet.
Okay.
It's in how they both died. The story right now is that Kirk was shot by a young white man named Tyler Robinson, sniped from a rooftop. Tyler Robinson has been branded as a leftist by a lot of conservative media due to some incredibly specious and circumstantial pieces of evidence that I'll talk more about later. I will add now that everything from his past life to his parents to his username on Steam and his hobbies indicates that he was your typical right-leaning young man from Utah. Meanwhile, Rockwell was also sniped from a roof by John Patler, a former member of his American Nazi Party who had a tumultuous tenure with the party due to not fitting into the Aryan aesthetic, for which he was eventually ousted by Rockwell for his Bolshevik tendencies. But what he really meant to say was that Patler was a closeted gay man. And I'm sorry if I can't not engage with the profound irony of these similarities and what they tell us about the hidden costs of movements like Rockwell's and Kirk's. The fact that Rockwell named his magazine Stormtroopers, explicitly insinuating the untimely death of his followers for the white cause, and the fact that it's that same belief in the expendability of his followers that led to his own death. And a similar thing can be said about Kirk, whose last words were literally him attempting to deflect the reality of spree shooters and similar acts of senseless gun violence that he's defended throughout his career, acts that, believe it or not, are far more likely to kill men who look like him than look like me. Because of this, Kirk ends up being just another victim of his own cult. The world Kirk helped build is the same one that killed him, and now they want to make him a martyr. Not a cautionary tale, not an opportunity to reflect, but a symbol to push their same destructive movement forward. And I can talk all day about how the rhetoric of the right and Kirk and Rockwell and whomever hurts me and those like me and those I care about, but we kind of already know that. Instead, let's talk about y'all. Let's talk about the other casualties of this forever culture war. Let's talk about the young white men dying like Charlie Kirk did. Part 3, look at me. I can't stop talking about the Joker, y'all. I'm sorry. I promise I won't be here long, but it's important. We got to get into the media analysis bag just a little bit for this section. I need to find a way to get the shirt. The short of my infatuation with Joker as it pertains to this topic, for those of you who are new, there was once a time where the Joker was this silly, almost queer-coded agent of chaos that was a popular villain, but not this icon for disaffected, predominantly white men. When I was a kid, I saw Jack Nicholson as the Joker in the first Batman movie, and I thought, yeah, that's cool. But nobody wanted to be him. Same thing for the Joker in the reruns of the 1960s and the classic cartoon series in the 90s. But then in 2008, with The Dark Knight Returns, the gritty revamp of the Batman films, we got a new reimagining of the Joker as representing the aforementioned disaffected group of angry, predominantly white men. And I've talked in multiple videos now on how that image of the Joker is so iconic to these men and boys because it embodies a fantastical, ultra-violent response to an indifferent and cruel society that both causes their dysfunction and rejects them forward. And because of this, they lash out. And while the Joker's popularity has waned as the years have gone on, the sentiment behind his popularity has gone nowhere. The chaotic, evil desire to have revenge on society is just as salient in a lot of young, predominantly white men, Dax notwithstanding. The last Batman movie just took the same character motivation and put it on the Riddler this time instead of the Joker, just because it still is just as salient now as it has been probably for several generations. This nation is full of angry, nihilistic, and potentially violent young men trying to get anyone to pay attention. And I don't think people realize how integral that sentiment is to movements like the American Nazis or Turning Point USA. These photos that we see of these young men back years ago in Virginia, these are not white men who are well on track in life, who are finding their way easily through this world. No, these are rejects. So I need to do that again. We're seeing the type of men that if the Joker was real, they probably would have been some of his goons, or as Rockwell duly named, stormtroopers. Stormtrooper might sound like Tyler Robinson. The limited info on Robinson indicates that he was actually a young man of significant intelligence, having a 4.0 GPA, scoring 34 out of 36 in his college entrance exams, ranking him in the top 10% of testers. Yet he went to an unremarkable state school and dropped out after one semester to enter trade school. He was described as shy and quiet by many and was clearly deep into internet culture if the memes he put on the bullet casings and his choice of Halloween costumes are of any indication. And that's all we know, really. Over a month after this huge story, it's been radio silent on any new information and why he did this. Conservatives like to say the memes on his bullet casings indicate a left-wing political standing. However, the memes are also well-known memes in right-wing spaces meant to mock the left. The only other ostensibly left-leaning aspect of Robinson's life is the revelation that he was allegedly in a queer relationship with his roommate who was said to be trans, though there's minimal evidence of that as well. Mind you, Tyler Robinson being bisexual or pansexual or whatever wouldn't make him any less right-wing. Right-wing men are very much fans of queer sex and trans women. The log cabin Republicans are a thing. Gay Nazis were a thing, even amongst Rockwell's group. If you talk to trans women, they will tell you some of their biggest fans tend to be Republican men. There's also been some effort by those on the left to say that Robinson was actually far right and killed Kirk because he wasn't right-leaning enough. Many connect the memes to other far-right groups, specifically those led by Nick Fuentes, who is a constant and persistent critic of Charlie Kirk publicly. There's a lot of internet lore there that sounds plausible from a biased position, but there's little validity to support this assertion as well. Then, of course, we have the conspiracy theories that it was about the Epstein files, the Israel lobby, body doubles, and all kinds of stuff that comes from these moments. But at the end of the day, until we hear from Tyler directly, we don't have a strong understanding of why he allegedly did this. All that said, I have what I think is a compelling explanation, which is that Tyler Robinson was like a lot of young white men, except he's evolved somewhat. Tyler didn't technically commit an act of mass violence. Instead, he made a mass spectacle of violence. We'll explain this a bit by talking about spree shooters. There's been a lot of effort as of late by the state, law enforcement, and of course people like Charlie Kirk to reframe spree shootings and mass killings in ways that fail to isolate the disproportionately white male and right-wing nature of these mass violence incidents. All domestic terror acts of mass violence and spree shootings are disproportionately done by right-leaning, straight, white males. Kirk's incredibly ironic last words were him responding, counting or not counting gang violence, to a question about spree shootings. He was trying to insert a racist dog whistle to deflect from the point of the question, and he did this because engaging with the reality of what spree shootings are in America will require us to critically look at white people, white men specifically. The right has put a lot of effort in making spree shootings an issue of trans people somehow, even though most research indicates that trans people make up less than 1% of all spree shootings. And bringing up mass shootings in the context of street violence as if it's a black inner city gang thing hides the white male right-wing nature of the phenomenon even more. Gang violence and spree shootings have completely different circumstances and motivations and thus responses. But conflating those two is the point for men like Kirk. Again, the goal isn't the greater truth or understanding, it's breaking containment. This is not to say that all spree shootings that aren't a part of street violence are done by only white men. There's figures like Brian Nichols or Christopher Dorner as examples of black spree shooters, but aside from being relatively rare, it's also not hard to recognize the difference between someone like Christopher Dorner, who went on a killing spree over being fired from his job as a police officer, versus Scott Paul Bierle, who killed 6 women at a yoga studio because he was depressed and couldn't get a date. And again, there are some black spree shooters with similar motifs, but they pale in comparison to the amount of white ones. While both events are abhorrent, only one reminds me of the popularity of the Joker. Only one involves this vague desire for retribution on society, which tends to be the unique motivation for mostly right shooters and almost no one else. In the aftermath of Kirk's murder, the term nihilistic terrorism or nihilistic violent extremists popped up on people's radars.
Talk about nihilistic violent extremism, but haven't really set out to define what it is, and a lot of people don't know what it is. So what is it?
At its simplest terms, nihilistic violent extremism is a practical definition that allows authorities, specifically law enforcement and the FBI, to attribute acts of violence that are terroristic in nature but lack a singular ideological focus. It's individuals who are mobilized by maybe 3 or 4 ideologies, but none of them hold a primacy over that person's beliefs or why they took the violent actions they did. But nonetheless, they're seeking to exploit the weaknesses in society through violent means and hoping to see it collapse or at least degrade a little further.
Essentially saying, we don't really understand why he did this. But I think that's a lie. This ignores a very obvious factor in many of these events, the desire for attention.
So you think Batman's made Gotham a better place? Look at me.
Going all the way back to the Columbine killers. When you read their writings and the writings of other spree shooters, you see a ton of patterns, and one of them is the desire for people to see what they're going to do, to witness them. Many leave behind manifestos. They send press kits to the media. They document their preparation, release videos of themselves. Some even live stream themselves in the midst of the act. They stylize themselves in ways to build an aesthetic, often paying tribute to other shooters or images of white spectacle violence. The Columbine shooters, for example, often got accused of being fans of The Matrix or that there was a connection there. But actually, they were clearly referencing this scene from 1995's Basketball Diaries.
Oh, yes. Someone open a window. No, it didn't work. Oh my god. Fuck, I should have saved right when I got it.
These acts are intended to give them meaning in a world where they feel meaningless. And I would argue that even the killers who do seem more politically or specifically motivated still desire some sense of notoriety and attention. Dylan Roof was an overt white supremacist, and his killing, like many right-wing terrorists, was explicitly for the goal of starting a race war through which so many people, black and white, would have died, again inspired by the Turner Diaries, another part of Rockwell's legacy. Roof aggrandized himself as the only person resolute enough to do what had to be done for white people, and wrote in his diary in jail how he hated that people had the nerve to question exactly why he was doing what he was doing, to question his mental wellness or say he had a drug problem. He didn't want any of those normal excuses y'all be giving to these white boys. He was adamant, and he's been very clear since then, that he has no sorrow for the lives that he took. You don't do this much because you're indifferent to being known and understood. No. You want to be known and understood. You want your words and actions to be influential and mean something. And I know this because law enforcement knows this. Since probably the mid-2010s, when it became clear that mass shootings were just going to be a thing we had to deal with here in America, the media and authorities began to give less attention and energy to spreading the names and faces of the perpetrators of these crimes. It used to be that committing a spree shooting of some sort would get your face all over the news for weeks or months. You get tons of examination of your life and your background and your parents and your friends and all this stuff, academic papers, interviews in prison, whole documentaries, etc. Now you're lucky if your incident stays in the news cycle for more than 48 hours, and the media will rarely say your name on TV. But what if you kill or attempt to kill someone famous? Then they can't ignore you. Literally the same day Charlie Kirk was killed, there was a spree shooter by a kid obsessed with Hitler and Nazis in a whole other state. But he didn't kill Charlie Kirk, so none of us remember this. Consider how much more famous Matthew Crooks would have been if he had actually killed Donald Trump. Further, look at his very similar background to Robinson. Quiet kid, highly intelligent, highly online, all the usual features, but at some point Crooks knew that he wanted to do some type of spectacle act of violence, and he researched spree shooting and other things extensively before deciding to kill Donald Trump. But he failed, and instead his attempt became fuel for Trump's presidential campaign, and his story has been mostly pushed to the side. But understand, targeting famous public figures for infamy isn't a new thing, and it's probably going to make a strong comeback because this is what disaffected, mostly white men have been doing for years. When you look at Ronald Reagan or Bjork or the murder of John Lennon, they all have the same similarities. My goal in bringing up spree shootings is to beg an obvious question. Why is this something that Americans have just allowed to happen here in America? No other country in the world, even countries with plenty of guns like Canada, has this many acts of senseless violence. But more interestingly, why do we not engage with the uniquely white nature of this phenomenon? Not just the fact that the shooters are predominantly white, but also the fact that the victims are predominantly white. Of all the inherent paradoxes in the modern American right wing, none to me are more striking than the fact that 20 white kids dying at an elementary school, or a high school, or an all-white church, or an all-white country music concert would bear minimal energy or attention in the alleged pro-life conservative agenda. Instead of outrage and self-reflection, the right has only doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down, with Kirk being one of the main people defending guns and gun culture and distracting from any real efforts to look inward. Him being murdered in a similar act in the middle of dodging questions on the nature of these acts is so ironic that it feels like something from a movie. Charlie Kirk's murder is yet another cry for attention from white men who are suffering under late-stage capitalism and alienation. But at this point, it's clear that the excesses of white death in this country is not a glitch, it's a feature. It's the entire point. And that's why Kirk has to be celebrated and elevated to such a high level, because he was a true believer turned public martyr. And other white men like him will be lucky to share his fate. But the reality is, most of the other deaths in the name of this cult don't have nearly the same level of exaltation.
Obviously, that's not what either of us are saying.
Well, what do you think is the cause of it? Like, what do you think is the reason why more men aren't succeeding and getting college degrees, and more men aren't going out and making as much money in their 20s?
I think that the current environment does not necessarily lend itself to the disposition that men have got. So they're less conscientious than women from a personality standpoint on average.
Maybe I should bring it to the lady in there, the
really
pretty
difficult
lady that doesn't want anything.
On average, for you to be able to remind yourself that you need to do this sort of homework. Men are more predisposed to addiction, they're more predisposed to using recreational drugs, they're more predisposed to being jailed,
I didn't
all of the
choose
sort of
pretty
gang
lady
stuff
out
that
of my
people
head.
get
It's
drawn
like
into.
she's called something
It's
like
just
that.
more likely for guys. There are more routes that men can be pulled away.
People on the right say pretty consistently that the left offers no answers to young men. The phrase is often, the left has failed men. And I get why they say this. It's stupid, but I get what they're trying to get at. They're getting at the fact that the left offers men no easy answers for the specific things they believe are causing them problems. Instead, the left, because we're talking about a very nebulous thing, right, offers young men a relatively unproven and risky way of reimagining themselves as men, which is in many ways antithetical to the way they have been taught to think a man should be. They are literally telling them the thing that they're actually pursuing is the problem in the first place. So of course, how could that be an easy or viable answer from that particular
young boy with
standpoint?
rosy cheeks and a
Mind
little
you,
butt.
there's no shortage of left-leaning men that exhibit the traits we often associate with traditional masculinity and manhood, whether it be physical prowess, desirability, wealth,
what did I need for them?
being a solid father figure or provider, and in plenty of cases, being a misogynist or patriarch. None of these things are unique to the right. Further, if you look at a lot of modern right-wing male figures, they come up pretty fucking short in their performance of masculinity, whether it be Ben Shapiro's clear low T count or the fact that many right-wing men like Kanye West or Steven Crowder can't keep their women or don't take care of their kids. But the right has the advantage in branding, not in truth. And so because they can frame their false images of masculinity as the appropriate ones, it's an uphill battle for anyone outside of that. The right's image of masculinity is based in dominance and the left's isn't. To the right, as long as a man aspires to or exhibits traits of dominance, then he's okay in their eyes. And while, again, these problems do exist with men on the left, we're not branding ourselves as such, and that limits our reach. Conversely, the right tells young men and boys that they can be a dominant alpha male as long as they follow them on Instagram and buy their vitamins and do this workout plan, as well as this 11-step course to becoming a millionaire before the age of 30. And none of it works, of course. The irony, the immense irony of the left has failed men is that the right has always failed men. The right has been in control of what men say they're trying to be for generations. And why are we where we are today, if not for the false things they've been selling y'all?
Algorithmically generated content on social media contributes to and profits from young men's growing social isolation, boredom, and ignorance, with the deepest pocketed firms on the planet trying to convince young men that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen. Many grow up without acquiring the skills to build social capital or create wealth. The statistics are insane. Like 45% of men 18 to 25 have never approached a woman in person.
You could largely describe America right now as a giant bet on AI. 10 companies have driven all the growth in GDP, are responsible for 77% of the earnings growth. Our economy literally rests on 10 companies now, often referred to as the Magnificent 10.
Two lads engaged
and they do several things,
roughhousing
but quite
and
frankly,
or
they're in the
lovemaking.
business of enragement, polarization, and then sequestering young people from all other activities. Now, of trying to establish a romantic partnership when you have literally lifelike synthetic porn. So what are we doing?
Is that
I think we have
foreshadowing?
autonomy attached to
I
one
light the
objective,
library on fire
and that
after I
is
get the
to
sheep.
evolve a new species of asocial, asexual males. Unintentionally, we have an economic interest, right now I would argue, in planning our own extinction.
It's not controversial to say that modern men are in a state of crisis, but that crisis is very much man-made. And by man-made, I mean capitalism, of course. I hear Tucker Carlson's worried about T levels, and he's right. There's substantial evidence that men have less testosterone today than they did a generation ago. Is it due to cultural degeneration or trans women, or the fact that corporations have been allowed to feed us microplastics for most of the last 50 years? Men are getting married less and are less likely to head a household. Is this because feminism has made women more masculine, or because neoliberalism has made it impossible to support a family on a normal job? Is it because capitalism incentivizes employers to pay people less and less to work them more and more, and the right constantly fights against raising the taxes on the wealthy who are in control of that equation? Let alone raising the minimum wage or paying for healthcare and maternity leave. Who would want to get married under any circumstances when it's two people just struggling together? Everything about modern men and modern society is a direct reflection of the failures of modern capitalism, but the right refuses to acknowledge this to the detriment of its own followers. The most damning statistic of the dysfunction amongst white men specifically can be found in the suicide rate. While so many white supremacists like to talk about 1350, the distorted data point that says African Americans make up 13% of the population and 50% of the crime, which is a willful misrepresentation of FBI data that we all should know by now. I've talked about it before. I'm not getting back into it. But what about 3070? Y'all ever hear that one?
Like all the
that represents the percentage of white men in this country and the
game
percentage of suicides that they represent. Yes. White men are 30% of the population and represent a whopping 70% of suicides in America. Yet somehow it's the left who is failing men. And this is on top of all the ugly things I talked about in the last section, like spree shooters, or how about acts of family annihilation where white men wake up one day and decide to murder their entire family, their wife and their kids because they lost their job or dealing with depression, both of which may or may not also end in suicide. Do I even want to get into pornography addiction? Pornography consumption is more prominent and tends to be more deviant in red states. You southern red states love your femboys and your porn. And pornography addiction, on occasion, spirals out into white men committing spree shootings. If any other group in this country had these types of disproportionate negative health outcomes, it will be all over every news space on a regular basis with explicit detail. They would call it the white male spree shooter problem and not the male loneliness crisis, because the reality is, it's the white male loneliness crisis. I recently watched a video by CoffeeZilla where he talks about the proliferation of gambling in our daily society. Shout out to him for the video as a whole, but I couldn't help be frustrated that he didn't touch on who the targets of this type of stuff is, which is young white men scared about their position in society, hoping that something as simple and easy and low effort as gambling can pull them out of a situation where they might be at the bottom of the economic reality and push them to the top. And yes, you do have people like Kevin Hart, Drake, even Drewski and Joe Budden appear in some of these gambling commercials, which, by the way, shout out to Kai Cenat for being one of the few to turn like these multi-million-dollar gambling company deals. He turned one down. So yes, black figures are a part of the promotion of these sites, but this is just due diligence on the part of these gambling companies to hit every corner of men they can think of. The real targets are young white men looking to feel like winners to grasp an opportunity. And this works because they know how desperate people are, how big the gulf between the haves and the have-nots is growing, and how no amount of talent or hard work creates a solid path to a viable, successful life in this country anymore. Once again, your grandparents killed the New Deal in the 1960s so that black people couldn't live too close to you. And mind you, problem gambling has a higher suicide rate than any other form of addiction. And people like Joe Rogan promote it regularly in between complaining about the masculinity crisis to his predominantly white male audience, all for the love of money, which he doesn't need. He got it from Saudi Arabia. And again, this is not to say that black and other men don't suffer from these issues, that the suicide rate for men in general is abnormally high over the last 40 years. But considering all the other ways in which black people tend to lead in negative health outcome categories, you gotta think that white men are working extra hard to outdo structural racism to take the lead here, all while simultaneously escaping the scrutiny and disrespect that usually comes with it. But here's the thing, this particular social problem is just as influenced by structural issues with white men as social problems affecting black men and black people in general and everyone else. It's just a different function of the same exact structure. Many white men, white male-oriented spaces have attempted to lay the blame for these issues at the aspects of modern society. They blame women, immigrants, gay people, etc. for promoting degeneracy. And somehow that is causing like factories to shut down in their Midwestern towns, even though they can't quite connect the dots there for you. They don't have to, because that's what you kind of want to believe. And they want you to believe this because if you don't, then you might accidentally engage with structures of patriarchy and capitalism that have been used to kill as many opportunities for normal white men as they have for anyone else. And mind you, this is why people like Kirk argue against women being independent and getting educated. The whole trad wife thing that has become popular in the last couple of years is a marketing ploy to convince women that they were better off in the 1950s when they couldn't get a divorce.
The 3 M's make you a better citizen and more conservative, which of course is mortgage, marriage, and mating.
In fact, ending no-fault divorce is literally something many right-wingers want to do right now. They want women to not have autonomy, often using the fact that women are so unhappy now as evidence of the failure of feminism, which is ironic because it actually just proves the left's point about everything. One thing that never gets brought up when we talk about the male loneliness epidemic, because it takes the focus away from explicitly men, is the fact that while the suicide rate for men is abnormally high and has been for decades now, women are actually more likely to attempt suicide than men. They're not doing any better under the current situation. And in another sick twist, the only reason why their suicide rate isn't higher is because of the methods women tend to choose for killing themselves versus men. To be blunt, men are more likely to use guns in attempting suicide, which is much more lethal than the methods women tend to use, such as attempting to overdose on pills. Thus, women are more likely to survive, creating opportunities for future intervention. And white men are more likely to own firearms, often as a manifestation of achieving masculine status and or the irrational fear that black people or immigrants or terrorists or wherever else are dangerous to them. So they want to carry these guns around in case they have to become John Rambo one day. And ironically, that just ends up making it easier for them to kill themselves when things don't go well for them. A paper published in the National Institute of Health said the following.
Themes of white male anxiety are common in recent social science research. For example, Carlson shows that white male anxiety surrounding perceived threats to their dominant status explains high rates of gun ownership among whites. Kimmel also demonstrates that the pressure to be economically successful, particularly in times of economic uncertainty, is a major source of distress among white men. Indeed, the narrative of the erosion of the authority of white men and perceived status threats is evident in the formation of the Tea Party movement and the rise of men's rights groups. Research on health and well-being also supports these notions. Case and Deaton show that suicide rates among white males have increased, which they speculate have been fueled by hopelessness. In response to this study, Phillips hypothesized that white men may have experienced greater increases in suicide because they were socialized to believe that they would experience upward social mobility and economic prosperity in a way that racial minority men were not. In other words, these men had further to fall.
This excerpt mentions Michael Kimmel and his concept of aggrieved entitlement. And while Kimmel has for various reasons fallen out of favor in gender studies, I don't think anyone has a better framework for examining the uniqueness of this specific social ill for white men specifically. Kimmel states the following in a paper titled Suicide by Mass Murder.
Feeling aggrieved, wronged by the world, these are typical adolescent feelings, common to many boys and girls. What transforms the aggrieved into mass murderers is also a sense of entitlement, a sense of using violence against others, making others hurt as you, yourself, might hurt. Aggrieved entitlement inspires revenge against those who have wronged you. It is compensation for humiliation. Humiliation is emasculation. Humiliate someone and you take away his manhood. For many men, humiliation must be avenged or you cease to be a man. Aggrieved entitlement is a gendered emotion, a fusion of that humiliating loss of manhood and the moral obligation and entitlement to get it back.
These men have been told all their lives that they should align themselves with these structures and traditions, that masculinity should be a certain way, and it's their job to ensure that if they abide by certain rules and traditions, that they will be rewarded. And in that process, they become foot soldiers or maybe even stormtroopers for these structures. And being a soldier is costly, and the cost is their happiness, well-being, and possibly their lives. And it's all to protect the system that does not have their best interest in mind. And more, so many of these men are recognizing that the structure is not holding up its end of the bargain, and they're looking around at their peers slowly dying, but instead of recognizing the system as the problem, they listen to the system explain to them that the real problem is trans middle schoolers playing soccer. And for a long time, it was really hard for me to make sense of that. How so many of these men can fall for such obvious misdirection, and why so few recognize the real problem. But then as I've studied the manosphere and the right wing over and over, I realized that it's not because it makes sense, but because it makes community. It's because the cohesive identity of white men is literally worth dying for from their perspective.
That's insane.
The real challenge that the left has in attracting men is the fact that it means deconstructing this ideological framework and reconstructing the concept of community and kinship for a lot of white men that, let's be honest, a lot of us don't want to be around. It's why so many white men on the left hold on to those same frameworks when they get here, allowing many problems to repeat themselves. And any white man on the left that tells you otherwise is not to be trusted. It's that sense of belonging and community that creates a barrier. And understanding that, it makes sense how so much of our daily lives have been atomized to reduce community, because it makes it so the only community left for many of these white men are these reactionary right-wing spaces. I remember when I was a teen that rock and metal were much more prominent parts of white male culture. There were much more popular genres of music that were intrinsically anti-establishment, anti-corporate, and unsurprisingly, within all that convergence of media companies, you saw them purposefully begin to exclude those types of very much white-oriented music in favor of music that was more easily commodified. Deja Sade does a great analysis on how Eminem, believe it or not, was probably the last true anti-establishment white megastar figure holding off the full control of MAGA for white minds today. Because today, most images of viable
It was
white
cool that
masculinity that are
it prompted
popular
me, like,
are
are
very
you sure
much
you want to do
right-wing,
this? And
very
save your
much
prompt. It
corporately
did the whole prompt
sponsored,
and,
happy
you know,
dog, happy
instead
dad,
of just, like, doing
whatever
it
the beer
automatically.
company is, all these
Filter people out.
podcasts.
That's
It's not
awesome.
just Charlie Kirk, it's Theo Vaughn, it's Aiden Ross, it's Brilliant Idiots, or whatever dude's name is that be hanging with Charlemagne. And this is why Trump went to all of those podcasts, kind of just casually saying whatever the fuck he wanted with no pushback. And now all of them are like, I can't believe he didn't release the Epstein files. We were tricked. It may seem like I'm being flippant here, but I genuinely just feel sad. Getting back to media analysis for a second, I can't not think of the War Boys from the Mad Max movies. I remember watching Fury Road back in 2015, recognizing that it was a brave decision to not just have these foot soldiers in the movie be nameless peons to be killed in the background. Instead, the War Boys were this great metaphor for what's happening to boys in our world right now. We watch as one of them goes through a metamorphosis to find meaning in a seemingly meaningless life, greatly through developing a new community apart from his cult of origin. I found a quote from the Mad Max fan wiki that is sourced to George Miller, though I couldn't verify this, still is too perfect to leave out here.
These war boys have no choice. They're culturally impoverished. There's no books, there's no internet, there's no theaters, no radio, no music. All they have are the detritus of the past, and they refashion it so a steering wheel becomes a religious artifact. They do the sign of the V8, the engine they've scarified onto their bodies, because an engine is much more permanent than a human body. They chrome their teeth, because chrome is such a rare thing. So like all cults, this is another cult invented by Immortan Joe in order to get people to die on his behalf.
What's so effective about them as a metaphor is how these boys reinforce each other. They're a community before anything. They actively have some touching and endearing moments of brotherhood within their cult, which is something that needs to be recognized. It's why it works. But at the end of the day, regardless of those minor positive moments, this is a closed circle. They're not allowed out and not allowed to see the world beyond their existence.
You need to find a way to get the
Less
fat
what
guy
happens to Nux, the character in the first Mad Max, happens to more of them. And this is exactly what happens in a lot of these male-oriented right-wing spaces. These boys and young men spend countless hours in group chats, Reddit pages, and the comment sections of their favorite creators, creating culture around the cult, reinforcing their behavior and paradoxically toxifying each other where it would be incredibly hard for them to ever find community elsewhere. And the result is death. Socially, if they're lucky, but eternally for more than we like to think about. And in the meantime, the real life of Immortan Joe and his various cronies enrich themselves through their sacrifices. Don't look up how much money Trump has made in the variety of crypto scams and contracts in just the first year of his presidency, all off the backs of these same white men who voted for him, whose lives have not changed at all. The rise in the suicide rate in America over the last 20 plus years is almost exclusively driven by white men, often due to depression, addiction, despair, and a loss of hope, all while the right has controlled this country for most of the last 50 plus years and has pointed to us and everyone else as a minority, saying somehow it's our fault. And if you include the political reigns of Clinton and Obama and Biden as being right-wing, which you should, do some Googles. It's all pretty much right-wing all the time for a generation, for at least my entire life. But even not counting them, right now, Republicans have the Congress, the presidency, the Supreme Court, all three branches of the government, and what have they done for y'all? Aside from fucking up us. What has changed? In fact, they're actively trying to make y'all less healthy and less wealthy as we speak, as the president spends $300 million to redecorate the White House and invites tech billionaires over to hang out and plan future contracts for shit that will only make our lives worse. But as others have noted, cruelty is the point. If y'all know I'm suffering, then you're getting exactly what you want. I guess these right-wing men, these white right-wing men, haven't discovered some newfound value in their lives in the process, but they're seeing the inherent cruelty of right-wing ideology come to prominence. Abortion is gone. Affirmative action is gone. Trans rights are gone. Immigrants are being hunted in the streets. Genocide is still happening, and even more is on the horizon, but nothing for addiction, nothing for mental health. You're still getting gambling commercials probably in between watching this video. Nothing to improve that is on the American agenda. The big beautiful bill made significant cuts to benefits and made it so you can't even challenge AI doing whatever the fuck AI is about to do to us in the next 10 years. Meanwhile, Gen Z, the generation most targeted by Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk, is committing suicide at a higher rate than previous generations. This is the agenda people were mourning when they say Charlie Kirk was a good guy, as his friends strip them of rights, money, humanity, and generally make them less healthy and less safe. As long as this video is, and as much as I've already said, I still don't think I have adequate words to make sense of that. So instead, I'll actually try to end with a little hope. An important thing to remember about all of this is that no fascist regime exists forever. And while fascism is here in this country right now, most Americans are not on board, even those who are politically uninclined, even those who are moderately right-leaning. In 2 terms, Trump has never been a popular president. He's consistently polled under 45%, and on average, he's the least popular president since the 1940s. He did not win by a landslide in 2024, nor did he win by a landslide in 2016. In fact, he's pulled in pretty much the same percentage of votes each time. If you manage to get off social media and stop watching entertainment news, you'll find that most people, even most white people, are not on board with this cult. They're not in it. Even in rural areas that have been greatly targeted by this cult, there are tons of people who understand what is happening and are resisting in ways that they can. Moreover, there are plenty of regular people who are amenable to just causes that just need to be built with, engaged with, talked to, and most importantly, organized. The reality is that the right is actually becoming more desperate because although they've been winning for so long, the fact that I'm even here making this video to as big an audience as I will get is an example of how things are changing. If they were truly so powerful, they wouldn't be working so hard to prove it. So those of us who are in spaces we can work to reach these people, specifically those of you who are whites that are maybe instead of moving to a gentrified area in the inner city, take your ass back to the rural spots where you came from and get shit percolating over there. I'm not going. I don't have the capacity. I've tried. It doesn't work. But you might be able to do better than I can. Because, and I don't say this flippantly, them motherfuckers need help. They need you. We have to recognize that the vast majority of the men that I've been targeting in this video are victims in this equation. Most of them groomed from a young age to see the world in a very specific way that ends exactly where we know it ends, for them to be fuel for the machine. So they die and the beat goes on. And all other bullshit aside, as a person who's done work in rural areas, who's been a teacher to young white men in the suburbs, or just as a fucking human recognizing that meaningless devotion to death in the name of forces that don't care about you is a sad thing, it's hard not to have empathy for what's happening to these men, and that almost goes to Charlie Kirk, who was only 18 when he was found and groomed by his right-wing ultra-rich backers to be a stormtrooper in their war. They paid him handsomely to be on the front lines, of course. But I'd like to think that at 18, nothing is set in stone for how you view the world. Who knows who he could have been without this structure in place. But instead, he was making jokes about genocide and running cover for pedophiles at the cost of his humanity and eventually his life. But out of respect for Charlie's memory, I'm going to do what Charlie would do and just say, damn, that's too bad. It's too bad what happened to you, bro. I don't know what to tell you. I have sympathy for you, but that's not my problem. Personal responsibility and all of that. See, to recognize the sadness of a man dying like that, leaving his wife and children behind at such a young age, to feel something about the tragedy, I'd have to put myself in his shoes. I need empathy. And
empathy is a made-up new age term that it does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time.
So I said last week after Zohra Mamdani endorsed Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker of the House that I was going to be watching to see how
left media reacted to that. I'm talking about all the very prominent left-leaning outlets and creators like the Majority Report. And I regret to inform everybody that no, they have not condemned it. They have not criticized him for it. They didn't call him out for it. In fact, they interviewed him right around Thanksgiving, and they didn't even ask him about it. Like, really, actually. They asked him about his decision to discourage a primary challenge against Jeffries, but they did not ask him about his affirmative endorsement, which is very different than just discouraging somebody from primarying them. And there were a few things that really upset me about this, but two of them being, the Majority Report has frequently called out the Democratic Party for being useless, feckless fucks, for being corrupt, for supporting genocide, for being lapdogs to the corporate class, and on and on and on. And there was a video that came out weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, where both of them are dunking on Hakeem Jeffries the entire time for what an incompetent fraud he is, what a bad politician he is, and what a clown he is for refusing to say that Zohran Mamdani would be the future of the party. Listen to what Emma Vigeland says about this before I show you what she said after interviewing Zohran.
We're always waiting for it. But like, this is also why I just bring up, the difference in between a communicator like this and someone like Jeffries or Schumer is that we are in a new era in terms of like what is required of leadership with the Democratic Party, as the base is screaming and saying, reject these corporate interests, become a fighting party. How do you become a fighting party? Well, you have to cut those chains off, release yourself from the corporate interests that are bipartisan with the Republicans and the Democrats, and return to a party that is for the grassroots. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, but when you have communicators that are able to generate enthusiasm about the party, then you get actually people involved. There's people power, and you can have a more grassroots fundraising apparatus that is less reliant on that. And that's part of the fight that we're talking about here, which is like the old guard doesn't want to let go of that, but it's also kneecapping the party from being an effective opposition.
See, and I know that there's dozens and dozens of clips like that because I listen to the Majority Report. So I saw them saying all this, which is why it was particularly disheartening seeing that interview and their reaction to the interview afterwards. Because it's not like Emma Vigeland doesn't fully understand that. She just laid out part of the issue with it. And she also laid out what happens when you actually have an effective communicator inspiring people. It does affect the grassroots, and it does affect the way they can fundraise. And I can tell you, after this little shenanigan, a lot of people are feeling pretty deflated. On top of that, I like when she goes, and that's why we have to fight. What fight?
Just kidding.
You're not putting up a fight. You wouldn't even ask him about it. At the beginning of that clip, she literally points out that the Democratic base is demanding a party that actually has a fucking backbone, a party that actually is willing to stand up against the ruling class and corporate interests and genocide, and wants real leadership, not the clowns like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. She says it. But then when that is put to the test, and Zohran Mamdani comes out and endorses Hakeem Jeffries for speaker, affirmatively endorses him, affirmatively endorses the guy that wouldn't even utter his name. They not only did not ask him about that when they interviewed him, and yes, it was after he said it, because I saw some people trying to cope being like, oh, well, they didn't ask him because the interview hadn't happened yet. Bullshit. That interview happened about 5 days ago. He was interviewed by Kirsten Welker on the 23rd. That was a choice not to ask him about that. And this is what she said after the interview.
I want to correct myself. I think, we were all, there was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to AOC first coming out, and then Zohran then later kind of, saying that they were not going to be supportive of Chiase. And
leaking out, apparently.
Yeah, and then there was Zohran at the DSA meeting that he kind of touched on there, where he spoke his piece about why he wants, it seems to be the case that Jeffries basically said, I won't get in your way as long as you don't endorse a primary challenge against me. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Jeffries has to remain leader of the Democrats in the House. He could retain his seat. I think it's very difficult to dislodge him, though. But if there's a leadership change in the Senate, it makes those conversations easier. And then having that answer from Zohran right off the rip, just about how he's not ruling out supporting other primary challenges, that's it. That's basically the answer there. AOC and Zohran stood down on Jeffries in particular, and then they're still saying game on, I think, for Dan Goldman's district and other districts across the city. That's pretty good.
What you just saw there was at best bullshit, cope, and rationalization, and at worst straight up manipulation and gaslighting. I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt because, as I said, I've been listening to the Majority Report for a long time, and I like Emma. So I'll just go ahead and believe, for the sake of this argument, that this is just cope and rationalization and not gaslighting and manipulation. But either way, it's really unacceptable. Like, do you guys think we haven't been watching over the last year? Like, we haven't seen segment after segment after segment of you guys talking about the need for reform in the Democratic Party and how the base is going to be setting standards and demanding better leadership. What do you think it sends, the message that it sends when you do that? Really, what do you think it sends? The message that you are sending as a leader in the progressive movement, in the media, as a journalist, the message that you are sending to all of those voters who do want better, who are demanding better, is that actually it's already okay to stand down. And I said it before, and I'll fucking say it again. This is not just about him discouraging Chiose from primarying Jeffries. This was about him going out of his way to affirmatively endorse Hakeem Jeffries to be Speaker of the House should the Democrats take back the House. That is insane. That is unacceptable, because what you are saying with that endorsement is that you affirm everything that he has done. You affirm the disastrous way that he handled the government shutdown, the lies that he told, the refusal to stand up for Trump, the refusal to call for Chuck Schumer to step down. You are affirming his cowardice and silence on the coup that Trump is trying to foment in Venezuela. You are affirming the bullshit I condemn socialism resolution he signed on to. You affirm his genocide stance and the fact that he takes so much money from AIPAC and the Israeli lobby. You are affirming all of that by endorsing him. And you guys are getting on here every single day talking about how you agree that the Democrats need to be bold and they need to have vision and they need to fight and they need new leadership and the base is demanding it. And then you turn around and you won't even criticize Zohran Mamdani for that very unacceptable endorsement. And the problem with that, with you guys not saying anything, is that if the people that support Zohran, whether it's people like me who supported him, everyday New Yorkers, or people like you who have massive platforms and audiences that trust you and that trust what you have to say, it is wildly irresponsible and straight up disrespectful to your audience and everybody in the progressive left movement to sit back and make excuses for him endorsing Jeffrey. And it's actually depressing how many people are not speaking out against this. How many people are just making excuses about it, whether it's people in your audience or people that are media figures and journalists and prominent people with big platforms in the progressive movement. It is depressing how silent you all are being. Because it's like, I thought we were all on the same page, okay? I thought that it was fuck AIPAC, that it was fuck the Israeli lobby, that you're not taking any money from them and getting support from us, that is fuck the current state of the Democratic Party, fuck Hakeem Jeffries, fuck Chuck Schumer, and the fucking horses that they rode in on. And people are going to start to have some standards here, especially since those same leaders in the Democratic Party have been the ones to literally help drive us into the fucking ditch that we're in as a country now. And we all agree that those people that have empowered the fascists should not be rewarded with leadership until Zohran Mamdani comes out and says, actually, I think he should be rewarded with leadership, and then you guys don't say shit. I thought we were all on the same page. Apparently not, because I have not seen really anybody who is prominent in progressive media speak out against that. No, instead, you have the Majority Report and others getting on here and making excuses for what they just said themselves a couple weeks ago was a feckless, incompetent, unacceptable person to have as leader. And then she's really sitting there talking about how we need to fight the Democratic establishment. Like, bro, you won't even broach the subject to Zohran Mamdani about him endorsing that contemptible AIPAC shill. But we're supposed to believe that you guys are about taking it on. I don't think you guys realize how much damage this is doing. Okay, there's a lot of cope and a lot of denial from a lot of the progressives and people who supported Zohran that this is doing a lot of damage. And it's not okay. It was never okay, and it's not going to be okay in the future. And the next time that hack Hakeem Jeffries does some fucked up shit to help Trump or to undermine progressives, it's gonna be a lot harder for you guys to jump on here and say shit about that when you wouldn't say shit to Zohran Mamdani. And it is particularly disappointing to see progressive media refuse to hold Zohran Mamdani accountable for this, because they are the only ones that can. If they're not going to, if we're not going to, then who is?
this mine? Oh, go.
So I don't know how many of you guys have seen this story. I think it kind of blew up on.
I care about it, but I've already seen enough about it.
Let me be clear. All of you ultra wealthy, multi-millionaire black people who are not aligning with what the black working class is saying is best for us, you're all on my shit list. Sue me, I'm not rooting for everybody that's black.
Sure is.
I'm rooting for everybody that's black with a pro-black, pro-working class politic.
I already did it.
Pro-queer, I got time today. Pro-woman. If your politic is not inclusive of the people who need government assistance to survive, if it's not inclusive of the people who don't even have the wherewithal or the resources to step foot into the food stamps line because they don't have a home, as my mom would say, you don't got a pot, they don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. If your political thoughts, when you open your mother suckers, does not include those mothers, I don't want to hear a gas thing about what you gotta say. Okay, so that would be Nicki Minaj, Charlemagne the God. That would be Mariah Carey. Bitch, I'm dragging all the girls.
Sorry, I
Well,
didn't mean to
yeah.
frighten you.
Hello?
How do you expect me to react to a sword-wielding maniac?
Girl, you really deserve your voicemail. Call me back when you get this message, okay? I got the tea and it's piping. But until you call me back, I will be calling my other homegirls. Hey, yo, world. Let's get into the tea.
I love that giggle. Hey, whole girl, or hey again, whole girl, homeboy, and homies. Welcome and welcome back to my other corner of the internet. Home girl hangout with me, your host and the big homie, Pervy Renaissance. Back again. So I've been MIA for quite some time for reasons that I am going to get into with you again if you were on the first iteration of this live, or for the very first time if you're just watching this one. But I do want to start with Nicki Minaj. Nicki Minaj's Fall from Grace is like a weekly episodic series that I cannot wait to watch. And you know what? It is particularly sad because I do come from the place of someone who grew up watching Nicki Minaj. And so to see where she's come and to understand my affinity and so many millennial and Gen Z folks' affinity for Nicki Minaj shift as she shifts further and further to the right of Looney Town. It's getting spookiana. It's getting spookiana. Hey y'all, editing Herbie here. This video was actually recorded about a week and a half ago, and for whatever reason there was technical difficulties, so I had to take it down on my Homegirl Hangout podcast channel. But I am re-uploading this because much has developed in the world of MAGA Minaj. Since I posted this video, she's gone to the UN, and she also posted this not so cryptic post where she describes going to the UN as a MAGA flex and that we should be afraid of what she's going to do next. Mama, I'm afraid of what you're doing now. I'm afraid of what you're doing now. So I'm gonna jump in every now and again. You'll hear from Audio Herb just to add some context to what it is that I'm going to be talking about through this video. And yeah, so I guess get ready for a little multimedia presentation. I did want to start not with what she said at the UN. We're gonna talk about that, and I'm gonna play that a little bit later. But I wanted to start with an interaction she had with a fan while they were telling her about how this administration is impacting them economically.
Morning, Queen.
Good morning, King. How are you?
I'm making it. On my way to this job that barely wants me there, but I'm still pressing through.
See if I get how long I can care about this.
Well, you know, since this new administration came in, people of color don't get the same treatment that we used to.
Good night, big one. Okay? I knew it was the reason I wasn't following your ass.
Nikki, can I speak?
This is the lady that y'all said cares about her fans above all else. I just feel like, Mama, if by the end of this video you are still deeply committed to being a barb, you have a sadistic relationship to this lady that I can't help. You know, if you're into the S&M, girl, do it with someone who loves you. This woman is not pro-black. She for damn sure is not pro-queer. And she's not even pro-barb. Okay? I just feel like that was nasty and rude. But I actually do care about my homies who are out here trying to get to the bag, okay? Come on, transition. And that brings me to today's sponsor, Free Cash. Free Cash is an online platform where you make money simply by playing mobile games. Yes, you heard me. Free money, honey. It's free to sign up, and you earn by completing simple tasks and offers. I know many of you are out there like, girl, this is too good to be.
We are amusing ourselves to death. Video, TV, movies, music, podcasts, and on top of that, constant notifications. They're all flooding in. We are always being stimulated, and as a result, it is killing our ability to focus. And this isn't just something that we've noticed about ourselves. Research backs this up. Attention spans are declining. It's easy to blame the internet for this problem, but it's actually much older than that, though the internet's made it worse. And if we want to do something about it, we need to be able to break down the problem and really talk about where it comes from. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm breaking this problem down into 3 parts, and it all begins with a shift from books to television. So in the 1980s, Neil Postman wrote the book Amusing Ourselves to Death, and he was primarily interested in the cultural effects of a shift from using the written word as our primary way to transfer information to a shift towards mass media, and in particular, television. The invention of the printing press changed the world. Suddenly, mass communication was possible on a scale that had previously always been impossible. And this is how new and radical ideas were able to so quickly spread. So the Protestant Reformation probably wouldn't have happened without the printing press, or the Enlightenment, or the American Revolution. But media theorists like Postman, and here we should also mention the work of Marshall McLuhan, also tell us that how we communicate ideas, the media that we use, actually changes the way that we think. McLuhan's favorite phrase here was, "The medium is the message." So Postman uses early American culture as an example of what he calls the typographic mind. This is a mind that has been shaped primarily through consuming books. And that means that it's a mind that's used to prolonged sessions of engaged, serious, rational activity. In other words, it's a mind that's used to focusing. So that's the first takeaway. Reading as an activity actually helps build your focus, and it shifts the way that you think. But we've stopped reading. In Postman's time, more people were watching television than reading, and those numbers have only gotten worse. When you add screens and the internet and phones and all of that, which we'll talk about later, well, that just exacerbates the problem. 2 famous examples from American political history actually illustrate this really well. The first one is the 1858 Lincoln-Douglas debates. These are famous pieces of American political rhetoric. You should read them if you're at all interested. Some sources say that up to 18,000 people attended these debates, and they were later printed. That's how you can read them. And it's actually how Lincoln became famous in the first place. So each debate was 3 hours long, and it would actually begin with a 60-minute opening statement from one of the candidates. And then there was a highly structured format with prolonged responses. This meant that the audience had to be able to stay focused for 3 hours and also needed to be able to follow a single complex thought for up to an hour or sometimes 90 minutes at a time. And Postman says that they were able to do this because this audience, which would have mostly been literate people, would be used to following long trains of thought because they had been reading books. And when you read the Lincoln-Douglas debates, you actually see orators speaking in long, complex sentences. How they speak is actually being influenced by the kinds of sentences that they would have read. But if you skip forward to 1960 and the Kennedy-Nixon debates, you see something really different, because these were the first political debates that were on television. So instead of an hour for an opening statement, the entire debate was only an hour, and the opening statement that each candidate got was only 8 minutes. This meant that the audience watching at home didn't have to worry about following one thought for up to an hour or 90 minutes. Instead, they just got it into small, condensed chunks of information that they could more easily consume. And that mirrors their general media consumption that they would get from watching television all the time. The whole debate was only an hour. It literally was one slot of primetime television. And you know what the big takeaway of that debate was that Nixon looked bad on TV. That's why people say that he lost. Kennedy looked better on TV. Nixon's mom called him to ask him if he was sick. Generally, he just didn't perform well in front of the camera, and he lost the election. Political history, or probably world history, was made because of television. So already the media that we were consuming was changing the way that we were going to engage in politics. That's a big consequential change if you think about how much power an American president has. Television was making us used to consuming smaller, sort of bite-sized pieces of information, and it also made us more concerned with things like the appearance of a presidential candidate rather than what he was saying. And I imagine that if they had tried to have a 3-hour debate on primetime television, ratings would have slowly declined. People weren't used to focusing for 3 hours at a time anymore. The media that we were consuming was changing our ability to think and it was causing our ability to focus to atrophy. Focus is a skill that you have to develop, and if we're watching television all the time, well, we aren't training ourselves to be deep and reflective thinkers, especially not in the way that we would if we were reading good books. So then when it comes time to focus on something, like trying to read a really good book, well, you can't do it. You never learned how. People will often tell me that reading books nowadays is inefficient and that there are just better ways to get information. And I'm going to use some slang here that I think I'm too old to use sincerely, but this is pure cope. Getting your information from summaries or even from YouTube videos like the ones that I make is a completely different experience than learning from a book, because in a book, you actually get to follow an author's chain of thought. So as you read an author's thoughts in a book, you are actually thinking with him. You're actually training yourself to think, and as you train yourself to think, you're training yourself to focus. You get like a mental workout when you read, and you're not getting that elsewhere. So you're probably screaming at your screen right now because TV certainly isn't the most important form of media that we encounter nowadays. A cable news show gets fewer nighttime viewers than a really good YouTube video these days. And maybe the fact that we can't focus is due to the internet and the constant amount of notifications and this like swarm of content that we're constantly in. Or in other words, you might think that it's this that's to blame. And I think that's right. Just like we shifted from books to television, we've now moved from television to the internet. And that's a different way of thinking about information. Postman couldn't write about the internet because he was writing about it in the 80s, but another writer has come along to try to pick up some of these thoughts, and that's Nicholas Carr, who wrote the book The Shallows. So if you had to describe one word to sort of sum up your experience of the internet, I have a feeling it would be something like chaos. The whole point of a page on the web is actually just to keep you looking at it. So if you look at, like, say, your YouTube home screen, you're going to see rows and rows of videos. Then you're going to see possibly notifications if you have any of those turned on. You're going to see a search bar that tells you that you could go find anything that you wanted. If you search for a video, well, then very quickly you're going to be given recommendations. Click on one video and you're immediately recommended like 12 more. The whole point of that design is that if you ever get bored for even a second, you can click on something else so that you can stay engaged. We're so used to it that it feels normal, but it is a chaotic experience. And I think YouTube is not even the worst offender by far. I mean, look at TikTok. I don't really use TikTok, but when I've opened the app like twice, I feel like I got a headache almost immediately. And I know I sound old in this video. The idea here is to always give you something to click on next. Always. So even if you are watching a 10-minute video and you think it's a really good 10-minute video and you want to finish it until the end, well, if you're bored for even a second, you have something that could be potentially more exciting. You could click on it and you could see, because these platforms actually don't really care if you keep watching one particular video or if you keep reading one particular article. They just want you to stay on the platform. TikTok wants you on TikTok. YouTube wants you on YouTube. The New York Times wants you to stay on the New York Times site. That's how the internet works. This medium teaches you that information is easy and disposable. If you're even a little bit bored, you can move on. In fact, you should move on. That's implicitly what these platforms are telling you. In Carr's book, he really likes to stress the plasticity of our brains. That's our ability to change actually how our brains are structured in response to our environments. Our brains actually change based on what we do, what we need to do, and what kind of tools we use. So look at this chart for the average screen time for Americans. And now ask yourself, what do you think that is doing to our brains? Well, one of the things is it's ruining our ability to focus. The bad news is that your brain is plastic. So the fact that you use your phone all the time or that you watch too many YouTube videos means that you are slowly ruining your ability to focus. The good news, though, is that your brain is plastic. So you could fix this. If you made an effort to read more books, watch less YouTube, throw your phone into like the fires of Mount Doom so it could never bother you again, well, that would actually give you a way to save your ability to focus. This really is a solvable problem. But you have to remember that there is a war going on for your attention, and it is not a fair fight. There are large corporations with PhDs in psychology and the best design engineers that they can find, all working to keep you engaged. And that's why I like to say that the internet is a hostile design environment. So here's a quote from the first president of Facebook, Sean Parker. The thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them, was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means we need to sort of give a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's just one very telling admission from someone who would know. If you listen to other people talk about designing digital experiences, though, it really is basically the same. It's all about capturing and really holding on to your attention. By comparison, something like this, a book, it's not that good at holding your attention unless you're really used to giving your attention to it. I think that's a nice way of putting it. Books, you have to give your attention to books, but phones, screens, the internet, videos, they steal your attention. That's why I say that it's a hostile design environment. It is a environment that has been designed in order to steal your attention and thus rob you of your ability to focus as much as possible because people make money from it. I mean, look, I have to even say this. If I can keep you watching until the end of this video, I make more money. And the people who design these platforms, they're not thinking about what this does to you long term. Steve Jobs told the New York Times that he wouldn't let his kids use an iPad. And Mark Zuckerberg and his wife don't let their kids use Facebook. I don't even know if they let their kids have phones. Basically, these are people who would really know the effects of these technologies. They help to design and build them and popularize them. And they know what it does to people. And they wanted to protect their kids from that. So I would ask, why don't you want to protect yourself from that? Now, there are things you can do to build your focus, but they're all easier said than done. First, you have to turn off your phone. You have to learn to take long breaks from it. If you can take day-long breaks from it, if you can go an entire day without looking at your phone, then you're already well on your way, but you have to get used to it. Having something in your pocket that can always grab your attention with a single sound or a buzz, or even if you have it on silent, the ability, the sort of promise that if you just turned it on, maybe you would find something fun, that is going to rob you of your ability to focus. Next, you want to start consuming media that actually demands that you pay attention. This could even be movies. It doesn't always have to be books. But if you're going to watch movies, they can't be those new Netflix movies, because those movies are actually being written and produced with the intention that you will watch them while you're also scrolling on your phone. Like, they're made for people who are distracted. It's already changing the way that we make art. So watch actual good movies. Go to a movie theater that will kick you out if you turn your phone on. And the third way is probably the most important. Get used to not being digitally stimulated all the time. Go on morning walks and don't take your phone at all. Just go and be there with your thoughts. Maybe even see how long you can go on that walk while you sustain a thought in your head. You know, thinking through an idea, debating with yourself. Just try it out. It can be more fun than it sounds. The point is to just get used to not needing to be stimulated by a phone or by a screen all the time. And by doing that, we are going to be training our brains to actually rewire themselves. We're actually then encouraging our minds to get used to focusing again. And maybe we can make a little bit of progress and we'll actually be able to focus on things that we care about.
Hamatak Yapi, thanks for joining us. This is Nick Estes, co-host of the Red Nation podcast. We have some special guests today. Some comrades from the Democratic Socialists of America are joining the podcast today to have what's hopefully a frank and free-flowing discussion about the direction of the organization and building, a socialist movement in the United States, what that means.
Your party is the left-wing party, which was launched by Jeremy Corbyn, former leader of the Labour Party, Zara Sultana, very much associated with it. It has had a rocky few months, guys. Let's come out and say it. Lots of infighting, lots of disputes going on. It's been messy, but huge numbers of people signed up to it. There was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm, and there still is among.
I think that in isolation, there would be different ways that you could read Mamdani's engagement with Trump. But when it's situated against him also trying to keep Chiose from running against Hakeem Jeffries, he's now court and endorsed Hakeem Jeffries, who is a murderous Zionist who has accepted almost $2 million from Zionist funding sources. This is after he would apologize for calling the NYPD racist. As a black man, I've got a serious problem with that. This is after, he's made a series of concessions, he was winning and running away with things. So my concern is that why run to the center when you hold the hammer, when you actually have constituencies behind you and you have run out in front of the pack by being at least a progressive populist, if not an outright leftist. And for me, I just want to be clear, I am rooting for Mamdani. I have mutual acquaintances in the New York City Muslim community that vouch for his personal integrity and character. But I believe that if you want Mamdani to do well, then hold him. And instead, what I see is a lot of stand behavior from the vote blue no matter who crowd that will, instead of like pressing for accountability, like what is the Hakeem Jeffries position? What's the rationale behind this particular approach to Trump? No communication with the base on those things. And instead, what it looks like for all the world is that it looks like another Bernie Sanders AOC style sheepdog operation, which is that somebody emerges with a series of apparently leftist policy position. As they reach a position of authority, the Democratic Party pushes them right. And the last thing that I'll just say on this is that my colleague Dylan Rodriguez at UC Riverside, he put it, I think, best. He said the Democrat Party is the most effective counterinsurgency organization ever to emerge in modern history.
Yeah.
So when I see people that are moving in that way, especially when they're people that I have other reasons to root for, then I'm gonna hold their feet to the flames.
Right.
And I think transparency in that sense is key here, in particular when it comes to the things like Hakeem Jeffries and the was part of the endorsement vote for Chi, for example, like that DSA did.
And by the way, just so people know, Chi Osei was going to primary Hakeem Jeffries, right? And he sought the endorsement of DSA. Although from what I've heard, he hasn't been in DSA very long, or he doesn't have that much. You can clarify, but that's something I would love to hear about. So basically, to summarize, Mamdani will not back Chi Osei's challenge of Hakeem Jeffries, House Speaker Hakeem Jeffries.
Yeah, and I mean the vote was very split in DSA, and I can't really talk about the the process in between because we're sort of sworn to secrecy on that. But there's the question is still out on whether it was
white smoke coming out of the
exactly. It's just like that. It's just like the Pope. But it was not a settled thing, and it is not a settled thing. I mean, it was very close to half of the DSA membership was in favor, and then a little bit more than half was not. And so, and all for different reasons. I've heard all sorts of different reasons. Yes, the amount of time that she has spent in DSA is limited, and he's been around for a while now. Crown Heights Senate Union is within his district, and so we've worked with Chi quite a bit since he was elected, and also tends towards the YIMBY sort of standard, and so like that's something that we'd like to see different. But again, we hold him accountable. Like we're very clear with Chi, and he's the kind of person that we have been able to move on different things. And so, yeah, I mean, I think especially when it comes to Jeffries, because Jeffries is incredibly popular in certain parts of our district, or like I'm the neighboring congressional district, but there's just a lot of people, and primarily in the public housing areas, in the areas with a lot of rent stabilized tenants, primarily where you have working class Black and brown folks. That's where Hakeem is popular, and so it makes a very difficult messaging sort of thing for a campaign, because we know what Hakeem is and like what he represents, who he works for, but it's hard to tell, like, the aunties and grandmas on the block that's what, like, we had that issue with Andrew Cuomo too. Like that was a thing that we had to like fight against. They're very entrenched. The Democratic Party is very entrenched in these neighborhoods. They've done decades and decades of work. The political clubs have been very are very influential here. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's important for those things to be voiced. I want people to be talking about I love the footsies with the fascist comment, because it's an interesting visual, but those things need to be said, and we generally tenants tend to be the ones to say it, because we don't really have we don't really have anything to lose in these situations. We're not in a situation generally where we're political darlings or that we're, where people are actually paying much attention to us. So we do say pretty much whatever we want. So I think that you'll see a lot more of that. I think also people are very, we're still dealing with Eric Adams. Like I'm working on an Airbnb campaign right now to try to stop Airbnb from taking over tons and tons of tens of thousands of units of housing in New York, and so we're still like in the middle of crisis and hoping to move into like not crisis with Zoran's policies and and a rent freeze and everything else that he has promised. But I think that the more I hear, the more I'm realizing that we're going to be we have our job cut out for us. So we're going to have to do a lot of work no matter what. Right. And we want him to win. Like we want him to succeed. You know what I mean? Like, and he is he's a lovely man. He's a very nice guy. Has always been incredibly, I wouldn't say radical, but like he's the person that you get arrested with. Like he's the person that puts his body on the line. Like he's that guy. So, I'm hoping that that we're able to remind him of that and keep him accountable to us and not to the people who are trying to woo him away right now. So
I actually believe that Zoran believes in what he says that he believes in. I just don't believe that you can actually execute any of those things inside a corporate-owned capitalist party, because the money inside the party broke Bernie. The money inside the party broke AOC, and I fear that the money inside the party is already bending Zoran.
I mean, I did have my suspicions when I had him on before he was running for mayor, and it didn't bode well that he didn't come back on the show during this campaign. I'm just saying,
that's definitely a bad sign.
I saw the writing on the wall. Yeah.
Red flag, Katie.
What's up? It's Bronze Crim, a comedian. It's the Comedy Tribunal. We're gonna be going through a little bit of Shane Gillis, someone I'm quite familiar with. I said I never watched an episode of Kill Tony last time, and everybody told me I was a liar. Let's just get after it, man. This special was crazy when it came out. It was a big deal because, like, let me check this was kind of like what solidified Shane is like legit in many people's eyes, coming off the Saturday Night Live cancellation. But this was kind of like his big concentrated effort to get his actual stand-up out there rather than just whatever edgy podcast clips that people knew him for. This was the attempt to put out something while everybody's eyes were still on him because of the controversy.
I don't know. I liked COVID. I had a nice time. I live in New York, so I left. I went back to my parents' house because I have white privilege. Some people didn't get to leave the city. I did because of my privilege, and I used it. You gotta use it. You know what I mean? Doesn't it feel more disrespectful to waste it? You know what? They were all just being racist for nothing.
So I feel like this special connected with a lot of people who got into stand-up around this sort of time. It certainly connected with me, and a lot of it is like a regional thing. I'm also from Pennsylvania, and like he just sounds like some people that I know and grew up with.
Favorite part of the year was I got to watch my dad watch the news. It was a rough year.
It's a classic.
For my dad.
This might be one of the most lasting jokes that he has from
He's
this
a Fox
special.
News guy. It's fine. Also, I see you guys. Most of you have Fox News dads.
You're gonna see the longer that it goes. A lot of people will sort of label Shane Gillis as like conservative comedy or whatever.
Oh, okay.
He does a fantastic job of saying things that are going to be like markedly offensive towards whatever side of the fence you're on, like Democrat or Republican, which is the sign of a good comedian, because that signifies that you're not just only doing well with people who just agree with you, and just making it deliberately vague what side you're on. It takes more effort to do that than some, I don't know, pick any random shitty Kill Tony comic.
Can you imagine if there was a show where a woman dressed and acted like a dude? We would beat the fuck out of her.
It takes way more effort to do this than that.
That's a good dad. I don't watch Fox, but that's a good Fox News mom? That's bad. You don't want Fox.
There's something, because he comes out and immediately defends the Fox News dad, you know, stereotype. Just hangs out the statement and says, you know, he's a Fox News dad, knowing the sort of almost like silent reaction he's going to get from the crowd, which is going to be like a, oh no, like negative sort of one, and then takes the stance and immediately contrasts their interaction, the reaction that he knows they're going to have, and argues with it to say like, oh well, you know, you guys all know you have Fox News dads also, and sort of defends that sort of that stereotype. And then as they're processing what he just did before they get a chance to even like realize that, he goes and the turn is the Fox News mom, which is the
Fox News mom? That's bad. You don't want a Fox News mom. That's a bad mom. She smokes in the house. But a Fox News dad, that's a good fucking dad. He watches it every night. Like every Fox News dad, my dad watches Fox every night until he can't. That's how long they watch. They watch every night until they get so angry they have to go to bed.
Norm Macdonald once said you can't do a good impression of someone that you have contempt for. So he is like digging into the like Fox News dad, which is his own father. They're good jokes and he's roasting the fuck out of them. It's funny and it works because it is coming from an endearing place. Like he obviously cares about his father, but like.
My dad will watch for like 2 hours, and then out of nowhere, he'll just stand up and be like, fucking Mr. Potato Head's trans? I'm going to bed.
Oh, he's the butt of the joke, too.
But he likes everything they say he agrees with. He's all in. I realize, like, Fox News is basically black church for old white dudes. You know what I mean? Like, literally everything they say, my dad just sits there like, mm-hmm. Yes, preach, Tucker.
That's such a good joke, approaching like a topic that is sort of like racial or political like that. Having the contrast where you're making fun of the Fox News dad from a spot of from an endearing place, and contrasting that with something like black church, like something that couldn't be like further from that. So it's a really like deliberate and just kind of like thoughtful way to like write out a joke and like put it together.
Every once in a while he gets hit with the Holy Spirit while he's watching it. The Holy Ghost visits him. He's just like, oh Lord, build a wall. Can I get a wall?
It's like shit like this that like it doesn't surprise me at all that when Shane Gillis was starting to like blow up and get more popular, that like Miss Pat was like taking him out on the road, because like this stuff, like these jokes here are going to do great whether you're in a room full of like all younger white people. It's unless they're like actually racist, it's like older white people are going to like it too. That joke would work great in a room of all black people, so it's a super effective act, and it doesn't feel like it's compromising anything from his point of view. It's very, very well done.
But I make fun of him for it, and then I do the exact same thing just with my phone. Every night I just look at my phone until I can't. I'm like, fucking Mr. Potato Head? That's it, every day.
Callbacks. That's the technical comedy stuff right there. Like a good callback. Everybody remembers that. Obviously, you know that he cares about his dad because it's his dad or whatever. That's another effective way for him to be putting himself in the same like butt of the joke. It's a good way to not come off like you're talking down to or like demeaning the subject of your material, even if it is your father.
So I don't know if you know this. Like being racist isn't like a yes or no thing. You know what I mean? It's not like you have it or you don't have it.
I actually say this to people sometimes.
Like being racist is more,
really
it's like
accurate.
being hungry.
Because people
it's
always have
like,
like,
yeah, you're
blind
not
spots
right
and stuff.
now.
That's why you always have to like side the liberal friend who like thinks like the little white friend who like, thinks they're like the authority
you're not hungry
on all
right
this,
now,
this
but
sort of thing, and they,
a
like,
cheeseburger
like,
could cut you off on the highway.
I think it's good to stick up for people.
One thing that I kind of watched and I guess understood early on is Shane Gillis does a fantastic job of like building tension where you're like, oh no, what's this guy going to say? And like his way of doing that, he's very, very effective. Equally effective at finding like the unexpected misdirect that breaks the tension and also simultaneously pulls everything together where you're not expecting. Like he never has a turn or like a punchline where you're gonna like fucking roll your eyes at it, which I mean that's just being a good comedian as opposed to, you know, someone shitty on the Kill Tony panel.
We're gonna molest the shit out of your kids.
Paintings can't talk, dingus.
Whatever type of cheeseburger you thought it was.
Cornelis.
In your racist heart.
It's like a punchline without having a punchline because everybody was following along with the logic of the joke, and like everybody, even if they didn't think of who would be cutting me off in traffic, they're at least thinking, what is he thinking the race of the cheeseburger is. He has a very like dopey kind of persona, but it's high level shit right there. So you can't see this. Obviously, the comedian isn't going to show you this. They have, when they're up on stage, they have like a set list planned out. Like I'm gonna do this joke, then this joke, then this joke, then this joke. And especially for production like this, even more so, you know, the audience doesn't give a shit about that. And if you don't give a shit about that, cool. You're not really supposed to. When you watch him, it never feels like, okay, this joke has ended and now we go into this joke. It's like very the punchline of the one joke is the setup of the next joke, and it's a tricky thing to pull off like that. It flows together, like the continuity of it. I know that's it sounds stupid to talk about continuity in a stand-up set, but it to some degree matters. I've actually lost, I think, a comedy competition because they said I had bad continuity one time.
Look, the point I'm trying to make is if you want to get rights in America, you just got to put together a good football team.
Painting him a stump, getting ripped to bits.
You know what I mean? Like if the transgenders got together and put together just a fucking hard-nosed, run it down your throat ball club.
I've seen this before. It's really funny. This is the one joke that I thought was like his other jokes really land really hard.
If the trans community could just somehow upset Alabama, everybody down there tomorrow would be like, "Those are some tough bitches." Actually,
that's such a good. That's such a fantastic joke. Like the way because it is kind of, it's like poking fun at just the entire like transgender rights situation in a way like nobody who is pro or against that is going to be offended at that joke. And it's not because it's insanely like safe or like sanitized or whatever. It's because Shane Gillis approaches all these topics and understands enough of what people believe on each side to not misrepresent anybody. Like if that joke doesn't work if he goes up and says like, if he starts like fumbling with like pronouns or something, or if he starts just like saying a slur or says or something like that. The joke is now unnecessarily, if he does that, unnecessarily alienates everybody who is trans who would have liked that joke, because trans people like that fucking joke. They do. And like nobody's getting upset by that at all. There's no need to. There's nothing to be upset about it. Unless you really can't stand the idea of Alabama losing a football game, I think you're going to be all right.
Civil rights movies are good though. I like Judas and the Black Messiah was sick. Remember the Titans is great. Hidden Figures was good. The movie about the black ladies at NASA, or as my dad likes to call it, Medea Goes to the Moon.
But it is like a funny, like racist kind of joke that he sneaks in, and the way he does get away with it by making the speaker in the context of the joke his father, to which then he plays the foil like in the premise
Antonello,
itself.
that's yes. Okay, wait. Okay, Skulls.
Look. That was him that said that. He said that. As soon as he said it, I was like, what did you fucking say?
Do I have to incinerate the head
You don't talk
somehow?
like that.
Just a skull?
So every movie just remade is more progressive. I just think it'd be funny if like.
See, there's a huge difference between Shane Gillis. Like, that's a joke that if like Hans Kim did that, he would just take on the role of Shane Gillis's father, and then he would just say that as something where maybe you think it's funny, but like, and you're not a bad person necessarily for thinking that it's funny. Shane obviously thinks it's funny. That's why he said it on stage. If he thought it was just terrible, he just would have not said it in the first place. But he has it come out of his father's mouth, and then he plays himself like, yo, don't talk like that. But everybody's obviously laughing, but it's something that's like, whereas like Hans Kim does that fucking joke, he would just be like, that movie Hidden Figures? I like to call it Medea Goes to the Moon. And then he would just wait for everybody at the comedy mothership to clap and cheer and be like, yes. And then, David Lucas is just like, hey, he's pretty funny though. But yeah, that's the difference between somebody who is a legitimate professional versus, a hack.
The right started remaking. If they just start like conservatives, like there's a new Scooby-Doo coming out. And it'd be funny if like the right remade it. It's just like Scooby and the gang going around ripping the wigs off of transgender people. It's like, that's not a woman. Some guy would have got away with it. We solved the case of the Starbucks ghoul.
Starbucks ghoul is a good line. That might be out of all the jokes in here, that is maybe the most skewed to one side. I think that was the one.
Oh, for sure.
If there is one for transgender people to object to, it would probably be that one. Still funny. I like it, but.
Has enough time passed that can we admit that Trump was funny? Can we finally admit that he was funny?
Peter?
Well, hold on.
Antonello and Peter?
I don't like the tone of that. That's not what I'm going for here.
He does feel like he has some sort of obligation to
check Peter for
not, and then whether it's not even necessarily like a moral obligation because of the politics of it. I feel like as a performer, you have an obligation to just not
try to burn
be
it in the fire where the
a hack. So like he is a comedian. If he goes up there and says something political for people to say like, yes, I agree with this. Yes, this is also what I believe. You cease to be a comedian at that point. At that moment, at the very least. That's why he doesn't really allow the crowd to go all in, like whether they're a pro-Trump crowd or not. Like he says, he's not here for it to turn into a rally. It's funny because just looking at Shane's like hand motions and all right here, I can see friends of mine, you know who you are if you're watching this, have like ripped off so many like these little like hand motions right here, like a little hand behind the back right there. People are ripping that off, and they're ripping that off because they saw Shane Gillis do it. Like
describe something.
I'll point out next time I notice him doing the two hands on the microphone.
It's every time like
that. Right there.
What?
Right here. This right. That.
Wait, what the fuck?
That is so often ripped off. If you haven't just seen like amateur stand-up or just like been to open mics, you would be stunned how ubiquitous this kind of stuff is.
Why? It's been making me laugh thinking about Trump like not understanding why people are homeless.
Oh, can I put it in the barrel?
I walked out, I saw him, I said, why?
Something I've seen people criticize him for is laughing at his own jokes, which I'm not gonna say there's nothing there.
I don't care. I don't mind that, especially if like it's somebody like
because especially watching
I guess it's subjective. Like
lesser talented comedians, but like Stavros, they a lot of times if their material isn't strong enough to just to elicit the laughter from you just on its own, they will laugh like as if it's like a cue for you to follow suit and do the same thing. I think it's easy to kind of conflate that habit and behavior with
sometimes you can just laugh while you're on stage, and it's a way to I guess kind of like lighten the mood, make sure people are just you know, feeling good. Also, if everybody was fucking Anthony Jeselnik on stage, it would suck if everybody was just like stone faced, just staring at you.
Just listen.
Fucking Mitch Hedberg laughed
I,
at his
I
own
think
jokes. Who gives a shit?
it's fair to say that of all the presidents we've had, I think it's fair to say that Trump would have been the funniest one to see get shot.
It's aged so well, didn't it?
Take a look what happened.
You know?
He does a really good job in his voice inflection too. Like I was saying, but like in his voice inflection, you can hear the laugh coming, like just while he's talking. But let's go back to this.
No, look, I didn't even say it would be funny. I said funniest.
Such a
huge
great
difference. Technically, there's a funniest of everything. There is. It doesn't make it funny, but there is, like, think of the worst thing you can think of. There's a funniest one.
Okay, I'm gonna be
I'll go
this.
first. I'll think of one. School shooting. None of those are funny. Zero funny. But maybe there was one where, like, the horse girl in the class, like, could sense something was coming. You know what I mean? And they were like, "What's wrong?" And she was like,
like, that's one of the other things. Like his style isn't it's a style that I like quite a bit. I think when he's at his best a lot of the time is almost just having a premise and having the confidence to almost just hang it out there and just let people just imagine it and a laugh for themselves without just saying like, okay, we're gonna like rule of threes, blah blah blah, call back, everything like that. It's just like, okay, well, guess what, and just almost just like dropping it on top of them, having sort of like the confidence to do that. Yeah, I think the horse girl school shooting is a very good example of that. Who else is gonna say that? That's a fantastic joke. It's a fantastic premise. It's great.
be doing like a rally. Be like, my opponent's gay.
It's good. It's good, and it's I think it's healthy, and I think it's a mark of a good comedian to go up and in one breath talk about like having like trying to get people to laugh at like ripping the wigs off of transgender people, and then in the same and then like 5 minutes later going up and saying like, wouldn't it be funny if Trump got shot? And you're like setting the bar higher for yourself so that when you do succeed on it, it means more. It in a way like the dichotomy of having the joke shitting on both sides, it makes both of them stronger at the same time. When you prove that you can get people to like you and be on your side laughing, whether they agree with you or not, because you're gonna say things that everybody is going to disagree with at some point, and you still have everybody with you. That's what being legit as hell really looks like.
Relax. It's my.
That's cool having the confidence, to do this. Like, watch this.
Hell? And then my sister does heroin, and
you immediately feel the air just leave the room right there. One of the things that I'd say I do it less now, but one of the things I would like to do is I like in between jokes going from like, obviously you get as much reaction and laughter as possible and letting it go back down.
Line, but there's this
You can watch my earlier YouTube content, and I was going through a journey trying to figure out who Trump is. And despite popular belief, I didn't just come out the gate and say, hey, Trump is a racist, Trump is a bigot, blah, blah, blah. No, I was honestly trying to figure him out because someone like Trump is an opportunist. Now, is he racist? I come to the conclusion, yes, he is. You can be as opportunist as you want. You can still have morals and standards.
Pearls,
But
okay.
he surpasses
Got
that.
pearl.
But at the
Thanks for yours.
core of it, he is an opportunist. Now,
yourself
if you
to a
don't know
pearl.
what an opportunist is, let me
So
break
can
it
I
down
give
for
what's
you
her face the
like a
pearl?
fraction. An opportunist is someone who takes advantage of situations only when it
the
benefits
amethyst-
them.
Give her.
Ring a
What do they
bell?
need
Does
the
that
pearl
ring
for?
any bells? Often without considering ethics, loyalty, or long-term consequences. That is Trump in a nutshell. And trust me, I Googled what is an opportunist, and it feels like it gave me a definition of Trump. Now, when it comes to the Republican Party, we know hopefully in 3 years, praying to God, that Trump is no more. He is done out of the, not political scene, but not president. Jesus Christ, can we just not get him to go for a third term? We will be cool with that. But we understand the Republican Party is now going through a daddy issue. Once daddy leaves the home, they don't know who's going to step up to the plate. Maybe it's going to be a Trump 2.0. We don't know that. But we do know that Trump and other people built this Frankenstein type of party. The MAGA base is like a Frankenstein type of situation here. Now, me, myself, didn't know the story of Frankenstein. I'm sorry. I didn't grow up watching that. But I had to Google kind of the synopsis of Frankenstein. And here's what I got. Frankenstein is a classic horror movie about Dr. Victor Frankenstein,
Frankenstein is a book.
scientist who creates a living creature from dead body parts. Once the creature comes to life, it's rejected, misunderstood, and becomes dangerous, leading to a tragic
OMG, this is
clash
fabulous.
between creator
Pearl
and
earring.
creation. And that is what we're seeing the Republican Party go through now. They
Pearl
built this
earring.
monster up off of
Strange
hatred,
lady.
off of bigotry, off of misogyny, and every other ogeny there is. Every other ism there is, they built it into this MAGA base.
Was that man there the whole time?
And now we have someone like Nick Fuentes. Yes,
I
I'm
have
pretty
to
sure you
read
guys
pieces
heard
of
of him.
jewelry
If you
now.
haven't, God bless your heart. But now he is becoming more mainstream within the Republican atmosphere. And one thing that I've been noticing with this whole, bickering with Tucker Carlson interviewing Nick Fuentes, and some people don't like it, some do.
God.
What I'm starting to see is the MAGA base is going to want more of the authentic racism. They don't want JD Vance type of, he's racist, he's a bigot, but he's not fully out there. He's gonna try to mask it as best as possible. Put on a suit and tie and try to make it seem as if it's not bigotry. Someone like Nick Fuentes will tell you exactly how he feels. And trust me, I don't watch enough to know. And what the base is going to want is that real authentic bigotry, that real authentic hatred. They're not going to want a JD Vance. We already seen the polling. Republicans, voters don't like JD Vance.
This video is going to help you answer the question, when is it fascism? Or maybe just a simpler question, what is fascism? There's something out there that maybe is concerning you. That's why you've clicked on this video, to try to learn. And you want to know, what are the signs that something is fascist? And I really think the only way to truly get a grasp on sort of the mysticism, actually, and the metaphysical aspects of fascism. That's one of the weirdest things about fascism. The surprising things to a lot of people who start to study it is how non-concrete it is. So we're going to try to give you, aka me and my imaginary producer over here, my cat, Sophie, I guess, we're going to try to give you a image of what fascism is from its early origins all the way through the most extreme version of fascism that we've seen to date, Hitler's Germany. We're going to do that starting in 1848. Now, you might be a little surprised to see me put 1848 up on the board, because if you know a little bit about history, you probably know that fascism is really something that kicks off in like the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s. When we think of fascism, we don't generally think of the 1800s, much less the mid 1800s. And we definitely don't think of France, which is actually where we're going to get started, in Paris. In February of 1848 in Paris, an uprising is going to begin, which by the end of February 1848 is actually going to end the kingship of Louis Philippe, the last person in France to hold the title king. And why are we going to be talking about Paris, February 1848, a place where fascism really never came to power, much less 70 years before the real fascist party that will take power in Italy, Benito Mussolini's PNF, the National Party Fascisti. Why are we starting in Paris in 1848? Well, the reason is because I believe that a lot of the ideas that fascism comes to either co-opt or oppose can be found in this mid-century series of events that is so critical to world history, or at least European history, that few people actually know about. This is often called the Revolutionary Spring of Europe. If that sounds familiar, it's because a lot of historians will actually draw parallels between this event, the series of events in Europe in 1848, and the Arab Spring that takes place in 2011 in places like Egypt and Tunisia. The 1848 revolutions are a series of what, is probably most accurately called upheavals across European cities like Paris, Berlin, Vienna, Budapest, Naples. To some extent, try to liberalize their societies, in some cases create nation states out of places that don't necessarily have national borders in the way that we would understand them today, and build something completely new. And of course, each one of these examples, be it in what we call today Hungary, in places like Italy that are actually the northern part of the Austrian Empire at this time, in Vienna, part of the Austrian Empire, or in Berlin, part of these Germanic states like Prussia or Paris, already kind of a nation state. They're all going to be doing different things. They're all going to have different political projects. But in the end, the ideas that foment here, liberalism, nationalism, socialism, conservatism, they're all going to be on display in 1848. They're all going to ferment together in a way that, in short, is going to set up some of the pain and discomfort that is occurring in Europe after World War I, after the Versailles Treaty in 1919, that is going to lead to fascists taking power in places like Italy, in big movements in places like Hungary and Romania, even in places like France and the UK, where there are going to be fledgling fascist movements that are just not going to take power. It all, in my opinion, traces back to a series of upheavals / revolutions / riots that take place in 1848. So let's talk about what happened in Paris in February 1848. There is an attempt by the King Louis Philippe to crack down on political banquets. When I say political banquets, do you mean like banquets as in dinners where people get dressed up nice and go eat like a fancy meal and maybe listen to a few speakers? Yes, that's actually what I mean. There was a law in 1835 promulgated by a increasingly conservative King Louis Philippe that banned political assemblies in France. It basically said, hey, all these people trying to put limitations on my monarchy, I might be a more populous king than some we've had before. I don't necessarily claim to be an absolute monarch, but what I certainly don't want is rabble-rousing political liberals. When we're talking about liberals in this case, we're talking about classical liberalism, not American leftism, we don't want these people clamoring around trying to put limitations on the monarchy. And we'll talk a little bit more about what kind of limitations those might have been as we progress in talking about 1848. But the point is that in 1835, political assemblies are banned in France. Political speech is limited and curtailed. And there is a loophole in the law that people start using because banquets themselves, for whatever reason, are not banned in 1835. So you can't gather on a plaza to protest the king. You can't march down to the palace. You can't go to Versailles and hold up a sign. What you can do is organize a dinner and chit-chat about current events. And so people start doing this en masse. And in particular, a little over a decade later, in 1847, and increasing up into 1848, we start to get more and more and more of these political banquets. Now, there's other things going on in society that matter. I don't want to get lost in only talking about these people attending banquets, which would have been people who were maybe in what we call today the elites, the aristocracy, perhaps even hereditary aristocracy that want to perhaps have more impact on the king, to place limitations on the king, but are not necessarily interested in what we would call mass politics and democracy. We're going to get to the quote-unquote masses a little bit later, but know for this moment that what kind of kicks off this whole series of events in France in 1848 is these political banquets that start to really irritate King Louis Philippe and kick up a lot of discomfort in the monarchy. So what does King Louis Philippe do? All these liberal elites are meeting this aristocracy. They're having dinner. They're eating mashed potatoes and talking about what kind of limits they can place on the monarchy. So in 1848, the king, Louis Philippe, moves to actually close this banquet loophole in the 1835 law and ban even these political banquets as political.